All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's council meeting being held here at the Wauchope Country Club. It's great to be able to bring our council meetings out to our community, and today it's here at Wauchope. As a reminder, today's council meeting's being recorded, although it won't be live streamed today. And as this recording will be available as a public record, council staff and you, the public, should refrain from making any defamatory statements. I'd also remind the public that recording of this council meeting is not permitted under Council's Code of Meeting Practice unless prior approval has been obtained. I do note we've got media in the room. Hello to you, Ruby. Also a reminder to councillors that the microphones will remain on for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on First Nations people's land, Biripi people, and I pay my respect to Biripi elders past, present, and most importantly those young ones emerging. I also extend my respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander with us today or at a later date that may be viewing this recording. I also acknowledge and respect the many migrants that have come to this great country who have helped build this great country to ours. We've moved into a multicultural Australia of today. And lastly, to our veterans, both past and present, those serving, those who have fought for the freedoms we enjoy today, such as the freedoms of speech, freedom of choice, and democratic freedoms to express our views. Secondly, attendance, no remote attendance,
No remote
I see.
attendance,
Thank
Madam
you, none. Local government prayer. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome Reverend Samuel Gittins from the Rotary Presbyterian Church to deliver the local government prayer. Reverend Gittins, if you'd like to come to the lectern, thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor Penson. Councillors, staff, committee members, allow me to pray. God, you are good. Through you all things exist and have their being. But not only have you given us this beautiful creation, you've created us to be faithful stewards over this world. You've made us to arrange, to order, create, make beautiful, to manage and to care for the good things you've given to us. Father, we recognise that our task is difficult. We know that the work you've given us is often filled with frustration and obstruction. You tell us in your word, the Bible, that our world, while beautiful, is all that it's not meant to be. Work is hard. It can be frustrating, even exhausting. And so, Lord, I pray that you would be with this council team. Help them to know your strength, your support as they seek to be good stewards of the authority and resources they have been entrusted with. Help them to get along, to communicate effectively, to work together on a shared vision for the Hastings. Help them to genuinely care for each other in their common service. Lord, it can be a thankless task to serve and to lead, knowing that in every decision and with limited resources, the needs or wants of some can come sometimes at the cost or the needs of others. Lord, give them wisdom to balance the needs of the few with the many, the demands of regulation with the need to support jobs, the need for productivity while managing resources in the natural environment. I'm sure there are many other challenges besides these. Father, please be with them. Father, I thank you for the councillors and staff of the Port Macquarie Hastings Council. I thank you for their hard work and their willingness to carry this responsibility. Lord, we thank you. I thank you for the talents of this team here and now, and I ask that you would bless them. Bless them with honesty, integrity, humility. Bless them with unity, with wisdom, and with success. I pray these things confident because of the hope we find in our Lord Jesus, who even now is Lord over all things. Amen.
Amen. Reverend Gittins, that was a wonderful prayer. Thank you. Very relevant. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. So we'll move on now to item 5, confirmation of minutes from the ordinary council meeting.
Apologies, Madam Mayor, no apologies.
There's no apologies. Thank you. I did notice that. Moved on. Thank you, Madam CEO. Item 5, confirmation of minutes, ordinary council meeting. Do we have someone move and second? Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Shepherd. Any discussion on this? I hear none. I'll declare that carried. Disclosures of interests. Councillors, do we have any disclosures? Councillor Mortman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a disclosure of interest declaring for item 13.02, the Lake Caddo Natural Resource Management Monthly Update Report. I've taken all reasonable steps and rationale identifying no financial interest or financial benefit to declare a non-pecuniary less than significant interest in 13.02. The reason being that I'm a non-financial life member and former president of the community organisation Revive Lake Caddo, and I declare a non-pecuniary less than significant and may participate in voting. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mortman. Councillor Intiman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary less than significant interest in item 11.05, which is community leasing, for the reason that one of the groups mentioned in the report is the Wauchope Community Arts Council, for which I am an ordinary member and for whom I have been the returning officer in recent years at their annual general meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Intiman. Any other disclosures? See none. Thank you, councillors. Item number 7, mayoral minute. The Chief Executive Officer's Performance Review Panel. I'm going to move the amendment as recommended, which includes a new point 3 to determine that a councillor is nominated the councillor representative of the council on the Chief Executive Officer's Performance Review Panel for the subject period. Councillors, could I have someone nominate Councillor Mortman, Councillor Lipovac? Any other nominations? So in this instance, do we need a ballot, Michael?
With 2 nominations, yes.
Thank you. So I will go first to Councillor Mortman. Those in favour of Councillor Mortman being on the CEO's panel? Thank you. Myself, Councillor Slade and Councillor Roberts. Those in favour of Councillor Lipovac? Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Intiman and Councillor Shepherd. Thank you. So we will declare that Councillor Lipovac is the councillor nominated as the councillor representative. Is there any other discussion on this, councillors? No? So I'll have someone, sorry, what is the problem?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
may I inquire through you to the CEO to Group Manager of Governance if this were the intended process, or if it was preferred that there might be an amendment moved?
The amendment, as I understand, Michael, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we would have a ballot for the councillor, and the amendment would include a point 4.
Madam Mayor, that was certainly one of the options. The other option, was to move an amendment which included the councillor's name. So the way you've done it is still fine. It was one of the 2 options that was available to you.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy with that?
Yes, so long as we've met the requirements of the rest of the motion also, I'm satisfied with that.
Yep, okay, thank you. All right, so that has been moved. There's no other discussion on this, councillors? Councillor Intiman?
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure if I'm just not seeing it on the screen, but where is it that that Councillor Lipovac? So the amendment actually had
yes. So we've just had the ballot. It's included Councillor Lipavac's name into point 3.
Or alternatively, if I may, Madam Mayor, it could indeed go in point 1. One councillor nominated by council being Councillor Lipovac.
The way I have the proposed amendment that was given to me was that we determine the composition. We note Councillor Sharon Griffiths as the Chief Executive Officer's nominated councillor. 3, we determine that, and now we've had a ballot inserted Councillor Lipovac as the nominated councillor representative, and 4 is delegate to the Chief Executive Officer's Performance Review Panel the process of performance management, including discussions about performance reporting and performance reviews for the period ending 1st of February 2023. as...
Thank you. So that's now in there. The words weren't there before.
Yeah, great. Okay, sorry, I couldn't see this, and this screen I've got here is blank. Thank you. So if there's no further discussions, all those in favour? Thank you. I'll declare that carried. Move on now to item number 7.02. I'll move Val Allen Gordon. The recommendation is that Council note the contribution to the local business community of the late Alan Gordon, the CEO of the Hastings Co-op. I'd just like to personally extend our sincere condolences here from Council and to Alan's family and also his friends. And if anyone else would like to say, of course, Councillor Intiman.
Sorry.
No, take your time.
And I did go through this so I could say it. I met Alan Gordon 11 years ago when he first came on board as acting CEO of the Hastings Cooperative in dire times. He was, he said, just a businessman. But it soon became clear that he was so much more and perfect for the co-op's diverse enterprises and community focus. The words true gentleman have often been used to describe Alan, and it fits him perfectly. Never flustered despite the problems faced back then and the tricky task of managing the co-op's many business units, Alan quickly found his way into our hearts and admiration. Absolutely committed to community, he was everywhere at once, with his calm manner and surety. A wonderful man, gone too soon. I know he is and will be very sorely missed, not only by co-op employees and its connections, but also people across numerous other local organisations for his attendance at and support of their endeavours. Alongside the co-op, Alan was especially committed to the Hastings Education Fund and the then Hastings Credit Union. In belief that local business is local strength, he was an ardent supporter of growing our local future. I know he was over the moon when last year our co-op won the National IGA Community Service Award. Alan said from the start that he would stay with the co-op wherever he was having fun and enjoying his work, as he did, or he would leave in 10 years, whichever came first. Well, 10 productive years rolled along, and several months ago, Alan announced his retirement from the co-op, and his delight was palpable in looking forward with his wife, Kathy, to exploring a new next stage of life, and probably some amazing project he was quietly mulling over. His sudden passing is especially tragic in that light. Our thoughts and compassion go to Kathy and their sons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Intiman. Is there anyone else that would like to say something? Councillor Luca-Back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well done, Councillor Griffiths. So what an amazing... Oh, sorry. I'm also obviously not coping with this loss either, so sorry. I do apologise, Councillor Intiman. What an amazing man Alan was. His passing is a massive loss for our Hastings community. He was a man of great honour and integrity. I enjoyed many conversations and discussions with Alan over the years about anything and everything. He was super honest, straight to the point, always smiling. Alan had business nous, extremely intelligent, an amazing leader, true professional, which in turn led to outstanding business success. We are all the better for knowing him. He made a positive difference to many people's lives. While I was on the board at the Holiday Coast Credit Union, he would often check to see how I was going in my promotions and community engagement role, suggesting at times I should consider pursuing something a little more challenging, and here I am today. To be honest, he would make an excellent councillor. Alan was a man I respected and admired, a mentor, and I hope I've done him proud. Over recent years, with a glint in his eye, he would often talk about co-hosting our radio station breakfast show. Perhaps he was looking at options post-retirement. This week, the Co-op won 2 awards at the New South Wales ACT IGA Awards, including the highly coveted Community Service Award. So what a great tribute to the man and the organisation he led. Alan Gordon will be missed, and I understand the funeral service is on Tuesday at the Telegraph Point Butter Factory at 11 a.m. Condolences to his family, friends, work colleagues and those close to him. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liverback. Is there any other councillors who wish to say anything? In that case, councillors and those in the gallery today, if we take a minute's silence for Alan Gordon. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So all those in favour? Thank you. I see none against. I'll declare that carried. We'll move on now to item number 7.03, report on the Southern Breakwall, Port Macquarie Southern Breakwall. I'll move the recommendation as it appears. I'll be moving an amendment to the recommendation as it appears, that Council 1 note the independent report on the Port Macquarie Southern Breakwall by Angus Gordon, which was funded by members of the Save Our Breakwall. 2, note correspondence received from Mr Angus Gordon in response to Transport for New South Wales statement in relation to development application. And 3, note correspondence received from Mr Mark Hutchings, Executive Director of New South Wales Maritime. I know that has been sent to you all, councillors. Can you just confirm that you've received it?
No, Madam Mayor.
Sent by email about midday today.
Okay, so Group Manager of Governance has advised that the email was sent about midday today to all councillors. I do have these documents to table. With the permission of Damien King and Angus Gordon is the point 2, which is the correspondence received from Mr Angus Gordon and his statement about the development application, and the letter from Transport for New South Wales as provided to me.
It was sent from Linda, if that helps.
Okay. It was sent from
Yes, I have found
Linda
it was sent
Costas.
from
Okay.
Linda.
All right, fantastic. What I do have is I have the report here, the extensive report from Angus Gordon. I have an exchange that was sent to him, sent to Damien King from Angus Gordon in relation to the response to the statement made by Transport for New South Wales in relation to not requiring a development application. And I have just recently, dated the 15th of March, received a piece of correspondence from the Executive Director of New South Wales Maritime stating that the correspondence was received as far as this report from Angus Gordon, and that Transport for New South Wales has engaged an expert maritime engineering firm who will undertake a review of all the reports, that's Manly Hydraulics and Royal Haskoning, and now this independent review report, and including this one. So if there's any questions or any issues identified, we shall be notified as well as council. So that is the state of play at the moment. Those documents will be tabled and you have copies of those documents. Is there any discussion, councillors?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment that we defer consideration of this item until the next meeting, noting that that's the first time I've seen the 2 letters of correspondence since we were sent the 62-page report last night. That became available to us. There hasn't been an opportunity to assess that next to any reports that we've been able to secure by reaching out to obtain them. So I don't think it's reasonable on the night before a council meeting that councillors be expected to thoroughly engage with this material without due notice. The mayoral minute is typically used for items that are of such urgency that they can't be left until the next meeting, and in this case I don't feel that it meets that criteria, and so I commend my colleagues to consider deferring this item to the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Might I ask, these are for noting and tabling as public documents. We did know the report from Angus Gordon was coming, and it was actually Councillor Interman at the last meeting that said once the report was available that we should all be made aware of it. So the report has been made available, and these 2 documents have just become available as well. So these are for noting, so the public can actually have access to it as well, just not specifically for council.
Sure. So in response to that question, councillors are typically, when we are noting a document, we're also noting the information that we've engaged with the information and understand the information contained within that report. I don't believe that I've been, or all councillors have been provided with sufficient time to be able to do that, and so I cannot in good faith, enacting my duties as councillor, note that with what that means.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to speak in support of this item. You're 100% correct. Thank you, Councillor Mottman. This is just for noting. There's plenty of time for all councillors to have a read through. Doesn't need to be debate on this one in my view, because it's really just noting some information that's come through that's been requested earlier. So on that basis, and also the fact that you read out the correspondence from Mr. Mark Hutchings, which was essentially 2 paragraphs, I don't think we need to spend much time having a look at that one in particular. I do thank you for your advocacy on this particular project, Madam Mayor. What I've seen over the last 6 to 9 months is someone stand up for the community when something hasn't looked right. You've got right in there, rolled the sleeves up and supported our community with their passion and also desire to see this project reviewed. So on that basis, this is just one more step in the process of trying to get the best result for our community, and I commend you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Griffiths.
I have to concur with Deputy Mayor Shepherd. Actually, I do believe
Point
the same
of order,
thing.
sorry. Can I just confirm that are we currently with the amendment, or are we back on the original
No amendment's
motion?
been moved.
I moved an amendment, Madam Mayor, to defer consideration of the item.
Okay, all right, thank you, Councillor Shepherd. So you have moved that, okay? An amendment has been moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Griffiths, thank you.
Apologies, I can see I didn't give enough opportunity for those words to be written down, but the amendment was put to deferred consideration of this item to the next ordinary council meeting.
Okay. Would you like to speak on that now?
Yeah, I will. Yes, I do concur with Councillor Shepherd's view. A 62-page document, when I saw it was 62 pages, I didn't believe I had the time to actually digest the information. If I'm going to note information for council, it's not a matter of just noting it and actually putting it out there. It's ensuring that we understand the information that we're delivering. Otherwise, again, this information could have been circulated just to councillors without bringing it to council itself, and that could have been delivered to the community or to the state government or any other number of avenues. So if we're going to note the information, I'd want to have a good understanding of what that information is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not in support of the amendment. I've had a look at it. It has been made, I'm pretty sure, and I can be corrected, this document was made available to the public by the Save Our Breakwall team. So it's also been brought here, and I appreciate and I thank you for bringing it forward. In this report, you'll find that Angus Gordon advises that a DA is required for the breakwall upgrade, and it's not an opinion of his, it's an actual legislative requirement. According to Angus Gordon under the Coastal Management Act, this project in its current forms, needs to have a development application, a DA. If anyone's going to know about this Act inside out, guess what? It's going to be Angus Gordon, because he was one of the architects that designed the New South Wales 2016 Coastal Management Act itself with the Minister. So Angus is quite a subject matter expert on the Act. He designed it, and if he believes this project breaches the Act and this upgrade is potentially illegal, he's going to know it. He's the guy. In my opinion, council need to really, really look at this document. If you didn't look at it last night, you need to look further into seeing and maybe adjusting your support of this project to ensure that you're not supporting a project that breaches the Act and subsequently a potentially illegal reconstruction. This report, for my mind, is a real vindication for our community and a real testament to the continued fight from Damien King and the Save Our Breakwall team. And I, on behalf of our community, congratulate Damien and the Save Our Breakwall team and a lot of our community members and business people that have supported this project not proceeding in its current form. Because that, to me, shows that our community is really willing to stand up and support our community on issues that matter. And they love our community. They're stepping up and questioning this project proceeding in its current form. I'm really thankful that you've brought it in today, and I really hope you guys, all of you, review this immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maltman. Any other? Councillor Lipovac.
Madam Mayor, question through you to Councillor Maltman. If this report was so important, why didn't the Save the Breakwall group send it to us a couple of weeks ago when it was officially released?
Thank you, Councillor Lipovac. I'm not in the Save Our Breakwall team, so I don't know why they didn't. That may be a question you might want to have with Damien King, because he's the spokesperson for the team. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll speak for this amendment because I have to agree with what's being said today. It's not reasonable to send documents through the night before and then, as we just heard, at 12 o'clock today. I don't know about everyone else, but I was actually still working, so that's not reasonable to expect councillors to get across all these kinds of details. Now, all councillors resolved to get more information about the Southern Breakwall, and that's certainly what we want to have, but we want to have time to look over it as well. So I support the amendment to just defer to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Inchman.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. And yes, I did indeed say at the last meeting that I wanted to get this report. However, it has only just come to us. It's not a council document, didn't come through the staff, came at the last minute, and to echo what was said earlier, mayoral minutes are supposed to be for urgent matters. I would imagine, and I'll ask a question in a moment of the CEO, but I would imagine that we can engage in internal discussion about this and decide where to go, rather than noting a document that none of us have had really the opportunity to look at in detail as a councillor. Yes, it could have been available publicly, but we receive information through the council for council matters, and so at this moment I'm feeling in support of the amendment, and so I'll finish there and ask if I can ask a question of the CEO. And so, Madam CEO, we've had a number of requests for meetings and consultation with Transport for New South Wales that we haven't necessarily heard back from, and I would like to know if we could have an internal information provided to us regarding that, and so that we can discuss the implications of these more recent documents as well.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we can certainly call for a bit of a briefing discussion meeting if councillors so wish.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, councillors? Well, naturally, no, sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to call order on you, and the reason being is because it's a council. I'm going to call order on you, and the reason being, if you could just understand, the reason being is this is a meeting of council, inviting the community in. It's not a discussion of council. I'm going to call order on you, and I would ask that you refrain from speaking. We're holding a meeting. Thank you. So, moving on.
Question?
Certainly, Councillor Intiman.
I have heard from the community that there might have been an engineer's report which referred to the tree removal and the need or not, and so could somebody, either yourself or the CEO, advise if this report that is mentioned here is the only one, or is there others?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Director Watkins, I don't know if there's been a further report that's come in.
Through you, Madam CEO, no, I'm not aware of anything else. This is the first report I've received.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to speak against the amendment, and I'm going to do that because these documents are for noting and tabling and becoming public documents, although they are already public documents. These documents are already out in the public. This was to formalise as a result of the February meeting, Councillor Interman, when you requested that once the report was available that it would come to Council. So I have brought the report to Council off the back of that request. Yes, granted, this letter that is dated yesterday, that only came through at midday today, and with it came the statement from Angus Gordon refuting the claims of Transport for New South Wales and the development application. So in saying that, these are public documents that are circling out in the public now anyway. It was formalising this. The fact that Council wants to defer this for the next Council meeting, absolutely fine. If the numbers are there, it will be deferred. But in my opinion and in my view, this is going to be sending a message to our community that, you know, we're going to refrain from having these on public exhibition through Council, and, you know, that we're going to refuse for those to be made available through Council in a transparent manner to our community via this Council meeting. So for that reason, I'm not supporting your amendment today, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Interman.
Madam Mayor, I believe under the Code of Meeting Practice, I have the right to ask for some time to clarify a misrepresentation about myself.
Okay, and what is
Thank
the
you.
misrepresentation?
Madam Mayor, indeed, I did ask that this report come to us as soon as it was available. It's not come to us as soon as it's available, and more importantly, this is a use of a mayoral minute for a supposedly urgent matter, which is not in fact an urgent matter. We needed this report earlier. You undertook to bring it to us, and in fact, I believe that more importantly, what we're after is the reply from Transport for New South Wales to our previous requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Interman. Okay, is there any further discussion from councillors who haven't already spoken? I'll put the amendment to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Shepherd, Interman, Lipovac, Edwards and Griffiths. Those against? Myself, Councillor Slade, Maltman and Roberts. The amendment has been put up. And any further discussion on this? Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, thank you. I would like to clarify that what I would like to achieve with this amendment to defer this item is two things. So first of all, that I get to engage adequately and digest the material that has been provided. But secondly, I also want to convey to our community and my fellow councillors my regard for due process. All councillors have the opportunity to be able to put forward a notice of motion several weeks or a week and a half before the council meeting, where we're able to put the information forward. Given this information was within your hands several weeks ago, it would have been entirely appropriate for you to submit as a notice of motion this information, which would have given all councillors adequate time to consider it for this meeting. I think that we set a dangerous precedent if we can decide, if anyone can decide at last minute to bring a particular issue to council with substantial information without any time for anyone to engage. So I want my community and our community and my councillor colleagues to be, again, aware of my regard for due process and consider that approach in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Shepherd, could I ask a question of you?
Of course, Madam.
Thank you. When the report for Save Our Breakwall became public, did you at any stage look at it yourself?
Yes, I did, Madam Mayor.
So you have seen this report?
I have seen the report that I downloaded. I have not had the opportunity to compare the document that's been sent to us to the document that I looked at.
It's the same document.
You can assure me of that, but I have not had the opportunity
Thank
to
you.
be sure
Answered
of
the
that.
question. Thank you. I appreciate your honesty there. Any other discussion on this, councillors?
I believe, Madam Mayor, that the amendment's been voted on.
No, the amendment was put. We were discussing the amendment. So we've just had an exchange. I'm offering anyone else that would like to discuss. Now the amendment is the motion. Yeah, thank you. So I'm offering you the opportunity to discuss it should you wish. I thought you would.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a vitally important matter for the community, and the disappointment to me is that we haven't had the feedback from Transport for New South Wales that we've actually asked for, and I tried to make that point at the last meeting so that everybody who was listening to the meeting could hear that, and I don't believe that we've heard anything more from Transport for New South Wales. So that when we have these internal discussions regarding these matters, that needs to come up as well. And the forcefulness or not that we have approached Transport for New South Wales and their willingness or not to actually engage with us on the details and important matters of this item. And so therefore, I would, one of my reasons for supporting this amendment, the amendment which is now the motion, is so that we can have those internal discussions and see just where we've got to with Transport for New South Wales and getting answers back from them, because I believe that they have not fulfilled their responsibility to us as council in dealing openly and transparently with us and providing the information. I still want to see those LiDAR maps that we asked for, and why haven't we had direct correspondence from Transport for New South Wales regarding this? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Intuin. Councillor Mortman.
Madam Mayor, through you to the CEO or Director Watkins, have we had a response from Transport for New South Wales after our request? It may be multiple requests actually for these surveys.
Through you, Madam CEO, no, we haven't, except for the letter that's been tabled here by the Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, councillors? I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Intiman, Lipovac, Edwards and Griffiths. Those against? Councillor Slade, Maltman, Roberts and myself. The motion has been carried. Thank you, councillors. So we'll move on now to confidential correspondence. Do we have any, Madam CEO?
No, Madam Mayor.
I note none. Item number 9, items to be dealt with by exception. Someone to move and second that items 10.02, 10.04, 10.06, 10.07, 10.08 and 13.03 be considered as block resolutions.
Can I just create an amendment to that? Can we put 10.01 in that also? 10.01?
10.01?
Yep.
Yes. Does anyone have anything against 10.01 going in, back in? Okay, all right. So we'll include 10.01. Would you like to move that, Councillor Griffiths?
Sure.
Thank
Do
you.
wanna move
Someone
it?
to second. Councillor Roberts, thank you. Any discussion? I hear none. All those in favour? I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 10.02. Oh, sorry. No, we won't. We will move into... Where are we going?
I think you're right.
It's 10.1 we're back in, sorry. 10.3, investments and loans. Thank you. Someone to move? Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I'm happy to second. Thank you. Any discussion on this, councillors? I would just like to note a few things in this report that is only for noting. And what I would like to note about this particular report is that it highlights that aggressive rate hikes have been undertaken by the RBA, which are going to obviously affect interest on borrowings of council and the interest on those borrowings that we currently have. And whilst the borrowings that council have are low, they will have an effect nonetheless. And I'd also like to note that the report highlights an expectation of another 2 to 3 additional 25 base point increases over the months ahead through the RBA. And our community is going to take a hit, and that affects council as well. I'd also like to acknowledge, again, our loan borrowings are low, and this also represents an opportunity here for us to leverage borrowings to invest in future capital works because our borrowings are low. The report also highlights, as at the 28th of February, this year investment held by council totalled $424,663,650. Now, this was 8.6 million higher than the 31st of January this year. So I'd like to say well done to you, Madam CEO, and your fiscal responsibility and your staff and the management of money to date. What puts that money into our bank account is also high development that we are seeing across our region and developer contributions. The report also identified that the majority of our investments are in funds which invest into fossil fuel, and that is greater than 83% in fact. And the report also acknowledges an investment strategy to mitigate risk in relation to reinvesting to safe harbour against a potential recession environment. That is really important because statisticians are talking now about our economy in a potential recession environment. So back to the fossil fuel investment, in the Imperium Markets report, it's acknowledged that to move away from fossil fuel investments would have an unfavourable implication to the credit quality, rating and interest income forecasts. Now, this is important because the report clearly identifies that ministerial and policy guidelines must be considered when investing public funds, and that in doing so, we must not compromise a risk and return profile. So let's not demonise our money when it is invested into companies or funds that hedge and deal in fossil fuels, because this council, may I tell you, makes a very good return on such prudent investments. And I mention this, Madam CEO, because I found it absolutely interesting, especially given the conversations that this council has in investments into fossil fuel in the past. Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, I'd just like to, in noting those remarks, I'd just like to note three things. So first of all, I'm glad that you found those remarks in regards to the fossil fuel investments interesting. They have indeed been in the monthly reports for about 18 months, interesting that entire time. And there is certainly a lot more commentary within the reports regarding that people might find interesting. The other remarks I would like to add on to is in regards to our borrowings and our reserves. So in terms of intended borrowing to the future, there's certainly great opportunities for us, and borrowing is, of course, a really important way for us to meet our responsibilities in terms of intergenerational equity. It's not fair for people these days, our current community, to pay for instance, a filtration plant for water or a sewage treatment plant that's going to be used for the next 40 years or so. And how we achieve intergenerational equity is by using borrowings that they'll have to help pay for in the future. So, however, we'll know from our recent briefings, for those that attended, that we need to be extraordinarily mindful and careful about our borrowings into the future, because our TCOR ratios and relevant financial ratios are telling us that's what we need to do, is be very mindful. Likewise, in regards to those substantial reserves that we have built up, in these reports you'll often see the commentary about the reserves and how they're used. The vast majority of those are externally restricted, of course, to be used for specific projects we have coming up, and the vast majority of what we have currently is going to be expended by the end of 2026 because of the significant infrastructure projects that we're doing in terms of water and sewer. So it's really important that people in our community don't hear that very high figure and think, oh my gosh, it's a treasure chest or something like that. Actually, it's a very carefully accumulated set of funds for specific purposes for what we're going to be delivering for our community, and I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Intiman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, a question to you. When you addressed this item, did you say that you were looking for some further information from Imperium, perhaps?
No, thank you, Councillor Intiman. I had all the information I needed in the attachment.
May I speak briefly and then have another question, please? So this morning I got this information. Comments at the top of page 44 are now out of date. That's our investment report. Future loans are expected to attract higher rates, is the quote. What happened overnight to Credit Suisse, which I don't know what happened to Credit Suisse overnight, and comments about Reserve Bank's likely immediate moves, which are reinforced today, what's been happening in the bond market, suggests that we have seen the last increase in this interest rate cycle and that we will see the first reduction in rates in Australia late this calendar year or very early 2024. Maybe ask Imperium advice, as this could significantly impact both borrowings and loans. So that's my speak to the motion. And if I may have a question through the CEO to
Director Henschke.
Director Henschke. I'm looking around the table. Oh, there you are.
There he is.
There you go. Sorry, it's a little bit fuzzy this side. Whether it would be appropriate to ask Imperium for specific advice. It could come to the next monthly report. Ask them for specific advice as to our looking forward and what we can read from what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think it's important to tap in with Imperium, but the markets right now, when we're looking at what's happening across the world, particularly in the US with that bank closure, Swiss is obviously on the radar. There's other things happening. It may be that it be something we ask a few questions of a couple of months down the track, only because we're in such a volatile environment right now. That I don't think they'd be able to respond appropriately at this point in time. I've heard the things about interest rates are going to come down, but we're looking at inflation, we're looking at things unprecedented, really. And I think it would be, if we do that with Imperium, I think it would be a good few months down the track when we see what actually happens. The fallout is obviously significant across the world. If you look at the share market today, don't check your super balance accounts today. Today's not a good day to look at anything, the same as the last week. So it's a watching brief around some of those things. Director Henschke, I'm sure you probably said the same thing as me, but...
Yeah, through you, Madam CEO, I'd just say that this just shows the volatility. So this report from Imperium was, I believe, end of February, so within 2 weeks. So I would expect the report at end of March to take into account the events that have happened in the last few days and have an assessment of the impact of that on our portfolio and looking forward as to what the consensus would be in Australia for future interest rate reductions or rises.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mortley.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Interman. That first part that you read out, was that from Imperium? Who was that from? Thank you.
If I may?
Yeah.
So the quote that came through to me in what I'm about to say was quoting page 44 of our Imperium document. Yep.
What you read, the earlier part.
Just what I'm about to say came from the Imperium document. Quote, future loans are expected to attract higher rates. That was all that came out of the Imperium document. The rest that I stated was this other person's opinion.
Who might that be? Is it a person that is knows a lot about the market, or
has financial acumen?
You're
indeed.
not prepared to say.
No.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, just a brief question through the CEO to Director Henschke. Are we comfortable that Imperium will be sufficiently sensitive to our need for accurate advice going forward, that we have or have not a need to further instruct them at this moment as to the advice they're giving us, not how we change, but the advice that they're giving us?
Through you, Madam CEO, yes, we can have a discussion with Imperium just to highlight that perhaps if there's an option for us to receive interim reports or views during the month where there's significant change, then we can have that discussion with them.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I have a question for you, Director Henschke. So, given the volatility and, given the good return that we have been seeing through our investments, and yes, you know, the economic climate at the moment is very uncertain. Would it not be prudent that, given that a lot of these investments that we make, they are either AA rated banks, that is absolutely our strategy moving forward?
Through you, Madam CEO, to Madam Mayor. Yes, they're very much aware of the council strategy. Every time there's a reinvestment or a rollover, we get quite a bit of detailed communication on their recommendations. So that is very much part of our dealings with them.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Interman.
So, sorry that this is dragging on, but just to clarify another point there, my understanding, and please if I could have an answer here, is not that we're focusing on AAA. I think we can go down to BBB plus or something like that, and that's set by the state government in terms of their regulations, and we just stick within the regulations, and within those regulations we choose those investments that have the highest return. Have I got the summary right?
Through Madam CEO, yes, there are restrictions, and it's all to do with risk around credit quality, as in like the AAA, BBBs, but also the counterparty risk in terms of like limits to which we can put with individual financial institutions.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
Lovely. Excellent. So I'm just going to refer to one particular page here. And what it refers to actually is, when you do a quick assessment of it, it's essentially what our expenditure is going to be for works and other activities and operations of council. They total 340 million. And part of that point is development contributions of $65 million. Essentially, that $65 million doesn't cover the cost of those works. So, and as well, we also have backlog of infrastructure which we know still have to be done, landslides and many other works. There's tree management from storms. All of these are actually factoring into that baseline money that we have invested. For me, I know that money is not going to be significant enough to be able to cover all the work that we have to do. So essentially, even though it all sounds very positive, even with the performance rate that has been shown to council through our advisors, it actually says our performance compared to bank bill index currently is minus 0.62%. Essentially what that meant is that we have invested previously in as good a performance level as we could. In other words, investment interest rates though were as high as they could be at that point in time. But what's happening is the interest rates are rising and therefore the performance looks lower than it could be. And I did request a comparison to see whether, or some information to see whether we could actually change that rating or whether it was worthwhile removing those investments and actually changing or whatever, but the cost to do that was actually going to be substantial. So at this point in time, we're not receiving our optimal return that we could do. The other point that I'd really like to make as well is, although we're doing these investments in interest rates, again, at even 5% or whatever that might be, essentially our cost of materials and contracts has actually increased by 15% or thereabouts. So all of these costs are increasing continuously, and as they rise, it actually decreases our ability to actually to complete those works based on the contributions that we've received. So essentially we need to be undertaking works as quickly as we possibly can and delivering as quick as possible and being quite effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Any other discussion, councillors?
Good item.
I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? See none against. I'll declare that carried. Thank you. So we'll move now on to item number 10.05, opportunities for local firms to do business with council. Councillor Lippback.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to put forward a motion.
Yes, thank you.
Excuse me. Number one being the same, the council note the information provided relating to the tendering local preference policy, and then also adding two, requests that a report be presented to the March 2024 council meeting that details council's commitment to supporting local business through their tendering and purchasing process from the previous 12 months.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Interman, you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I would. First of all, thank you for the report, Director Henschke. I did note as we've had a discussion via email over the recent week, that 19 of the 55 tenders were awarded to local suppliers over the past 12 months. That equates to approximately 34.5%, which is a fair result. In comparison, 50%, or 10 out of 20 contracts, were awarded to local suppliers the previous year, which is a commendable result and one that I personally believe Council should be aiming to achieve on an annual basis or as close to that as possible. On a positive note, 17 different local suppliers were awarded contracts last year compared to 10 the previous year and only 6 in 2020. So this is an increase in diversity of local suppliers, which is great news. I'm going to make a bit of assumption. I'm happy to be corrected. Perhaps during those COVID-affected years, there may have been fewer contracts awarded, which may have attributed to the lower numbers. I also would like to see, again personally, and perhaps other councillors would like to see that as well, some specific details. This may be something we do during a confidential session on which local businesses were awarded contracts, plus the total value of local tenders compared against the total value of non-local tenders over the past 12 months. Now, more than ever, we must go out of our way to support local business in acquiring work from their local council. And as I mentioned last year at the corresponding meeting, the more we pump into the local economy, the more we'll get back. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lipovac. Councillor Interman, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, just briefly, and to echo Councillor Lipovac's comments, and especially in terms of us being able to keep track year on year about how we're going, not only in terms of number, but amount, dollar amount, because we've also got an arm of council that used to, and I hope still does, support local businesses that are trying to up their skilling and compete for tenders so that they get the advice on how best to tender for council. I would really hope that we're continuing that. And yes, thank you, Councillor Lipovac, for suggesting an annual report.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Griffiths?
Just quickly, Councillor Lipovac, would you consider actually a briefing as well as part of this?
Sure.
Yeah. Can we just add an extra point in there and just say, probably point 2, just prior to the report being presented, that council will receive a briefing.
May I ask a question of Councillor Griffith?
Finish. Can I speak to it now? Yeah.
I'm waiting for you.
No, I'm just doing the amendment.
The floor is yours.
Briefing.
My understanding is that briefing is incorporated into the previous decision of council. So Councillor Lipovac brought forward a motion to get this report today, but at the same time we resolved to receive a briefing. And my understanding is that briefing has been rolled, will be occurring as a part of a broader piece of work. So as I, perhaps through you, Madam Mayor, to you, CEO, and if there is currently a briefing planned to this end.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, so you're asking me if there is a briefing planned for this?
Just to confirm as per the...
What information are you relying on? If you could share that with all of us, that would be helpful.
So on page 50, on page 49 of our business papers, we can see that in on clause
point 2, request the CEO provide a briefing to councillors.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I believe we've received confirmation that that will occur.
Yep, thank you, Councillor
Can I just clarify that question then? Because that was actually in 17 of March 2022, so through you, Madam Mayor, to CEO, have we had that briefing or is it still due to come, or have we got some...
Through you, Madam Mayor, very good.
Or can we just put it in here and say that a briefing be presented and just move on?
Yeah, very good question. I'm not aware of one that's occurred.
Through you, Madam CEO, the briefing hasn't occurred yet. We've flagged a briefing from the March decision in around June, July as a broader procurement framework. briefing. I think if there's any additional briefings specifically required after that, we can schedule another briefing.
Right, okay. All right. Okay, and I'll just speak to it. Basically,
Sorry, Councillor Griffiths, so we're just going to leave it as was?
Yes, that's fine.
Great, fantastic. Yes, happy to hear you speak to it.
Scheduled.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically I'm just looking here on page 50, which basically says that there were the policy that we are referring to here, the tendering local preference policy, had no influence on the decisions of 55 of the tendering activities in the past year. So again, part of that briefing is to understand, more about what that might actually look like if, there's changes that we can make. That again, because that is a federal legislation, there are policies that are preferencing, local suppliers to benefit local incomes, opportunities for business, economies, whatever. So just again, what we could do in that space.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question through you to the CEO, to the appropriate director. Councillor Lipovic touched on it was 55%, the reduction to 34% local businesses. Can you just confirm that that was COVID? Playing a part in that?
Through Madam CEO, I couldn't specifically tie that to COVID, but we can do some extra work on those stats just to pull out the exact detail behind that.
Just through you, Madam Mayor, I think it would be quite an onerous job to go through those tenders and determine. Might be a bit resource heavy, but we can give you some anecdotal information back, but it's not going to be a definite response that it's COVID or it's whatever. Either people put a tender in or they don't put a tender in. What we can tell you is the amount of inquiries that potentially came in, and did they result in people putting in tenders? But that's probably as much information that we can provide back to you. It would be difficult to determine.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Shepherd.
Just very briefly to note, certainly there's an economic argument in terms of putting the money in locally, being able to have that kept on being spent locally. My interest is actually more how we fare in the face of challenging times globally, because, we know that there's going to be continued instability into the future. So my interest is if we are doing more business locally, actually that provides some buffering and resilience to any problems with broader supply chains. So certainly that's high on my radar. And I hope that there'll be more opportunities for us to apply that local tendering policy into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I actually have a question for Councillor Lipovac. Just going back to that previous notice of motion that we resolved on a year ago when we were in lovely Wauchope for our meeting last year. Can I just ask, was your intention with point 2 of this notice of motion that a briefing a briefing happen with councillors before that report, March 2023, or after March 2023? What was your intention?
Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Going back 12 months ago, I think the initial intention was hoping to get, prior to this meeting, a briefing as to what happened over the past 12 months. But with correspondence with Director Henschke during the week, I'm quite happy to wait till June, July when they want to formulate it all. Naturally, the sooner the better, but I'm happy to wait at this point in time, but thank you.
Okay, any other discussion, councillors? A right of reply, Councillor Lipovac. Okay, I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? See none against. I'll declare that carried. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 11.01. Just bear with me, councillors, because this is an amendment on the fly as well, much like the other one earlier. So there are new points 3 and 4. So I'll just read the new point 3. So note the resignation of Mayor Peter Pinson as councillor and chairperson representative from the Port Macquarie Hastings Sporting Fund Subcommittee. And 4, determine a councillor representative as chairperson and alternative councillor chairperson if required to the Port Macquarie Hastings Sporting Fund Subcommittee. For point 4, councillors, I would be happy for you to nominate now. that we can add into point 4, who that councillor person is as an alternative and who the councillor representative as chair is. Councillor Lipovac.
If it's okay with everyone, I would like to nominate myself for that particular chair position.
I wouldn't have an issue with that, Councillor Lipovac, except you sit on that as a community member, so I would have to seek some advice on that. Is that not a conflict of interest?
I think if you were to do that, you would have to resign your position, obviously, as a community member. But I don't think there'd be any problem otherwise for Councillor Lipovac to do that, which would then open up a vacancy as possibly a community member, so whether we need to refill that or not.
So if I may ask a question, so on the floor, can Councillor Lipovac, considering he does wish to nominate, can he resign as a community member on the floor of council as a councillor? It's common sense, it's uncommon, everybody, but I'm just asking the question.
Through you, Madam CEO, I don't think it would be appropriate to resign as a community member in a council meeting.
So therefore he can't nominate as... That's where I'm coming. This is where I'm coming from.
I think he could nominate on the condition that he were to, subject to resign his role as a community member.
Fantastic. Okay, fantastic. All right, so I'll just check, is there anyone else that would like to nominate as chair? Well, in that case, could we have some words as far as determine Councillor Lipovac? Sorry. Yes, I do. Can I have someone second it, please? Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. So the words would be something along the lines of determine Councillor Lipovac upon resignation as a community member, be subject to representative, if you guys want to work out the wording for that. Yeah, it's a little hard to have a seconder when we haven't got this actually down pat. But anyway, I'll take the seconder from Councillor Shepherd. I'm sure she has good faith that the wording will pan out. I'll just check back in with you before we move forward. Okay, and we do need to, an alternative councillor chairperson as well. Thank you.
May I nominate someone, Madam Mayor, at this point in time? May I nominate someone for that vice chair position?
You can, but I was hoping a councillor here might nominate themselves.
Sure.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Lipovac suggested that I might like to be the alternate councillor.
Chair?
Representative, or chair.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm casting around the room to see if anybody else would like to take that position.
No? So you accept that
I'm
nomination?
happy to accept it so long as nobody else is wanting to be in that position.
No one's knocking you over for it.
Okay.
We'll have you as the alternative councillor.
Thank you. I've chaired it in the past when the mayor's been unavailable, and it's a great group, and I'm sure you'll progress it well.
Okay, so we've got the wording there, have we, Tanya? I can't see it. I've got nothing.
1 a.m.
I just need to ask a question, Director Watkins. Given that we will have a resignation of Councillor Lipovac as a community member to take up the chair, we will have a vacancy. Do we need to acknowledge that in this for a community member, or just under the charter? Just go back out. Okay, fine. I just wanted to make doubly sure. Are you happy with all of that as the seconder? Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. All right, I'm glad we got that one out of the way. I knew it would be difficult, but we got there in the end. Any discussion on this, councillors? Councillor Liverback.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Shepherd, for seconding this rather tricky motion that's being put forward. So initially, part of that motion was referring to a change in date. So if I can speak on about that initially, first up. So following a discussion with the Group Manager for Governance, Michael Ferguson, and on behalf of the subcommittee, I was requesting a change to the date for the Sporting Fund monthly meeting, so as to expedite the processing of successful funding applications. So the current date being the first Thursday of the month doesn't allow for subcommittee recommendations to reach the council agenda 2 weeks later. Therefore, the Sporting Fund recommendations are not considered at a council meeting until 6 weeks later. And then depending on the cycle for processing of payments, it can be almost 2 months before successful applicants gain their financial assistance. So when you're dealing with young sports people and their families in need of support, an 8-week turnaround is less than satisfactory. So the notice of motion recommends allowing subcommittee members and council staff to be flexible enough to select a more appropriate date, meeting date. This would more than likely be 3 weeks prior to each council meeting, or otherwise known as the last Thursday of each month. That's in relation to point 1. In relation to point 3 and 4, thank you very much. I had a big spiel about my experience in working with committees, but I don't think that's required as no one else put their hand up to challenge, so we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. All right. Well, I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? See none against. I'll declare that carried. Thank you, everybody. So we'll move on now to item 11.02. Now, Councillor Shepherd, I do know you have an amendment. I'm happy for you to move that if you so wish. And, excuse me. Thank you. I'm happy for you to move that if you so wish, and I'm happy to second it rather than do a dance.
Thank you. I'm happy to accede to Councillor Griffiths in the first instance.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see that you had one here. Okay, thank you.
I said it earlier, but same thing. People have me to catch up, so that's okay. Yes, that, as it says, note the information provided in this report. Can you hear me? Yes. Note not include funding for the detailed design works to the value of $200,000 in the draft 2023-24 operational plan and budget. Note that funding of the upgrade works for the Tuffens Lane sporting precinct at this time is likely to impact on the implementation of other planned sporting infrastructure upgrades and or delivery of new facilities. Note the ongoing use of Tuffens Lane sporting precinct by sporting groups, and that works will be programmed and funded in accordance with the adopted revised action plan and future operational plans.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards.
Just quickly, I think I just have concern with the process on how the, I suppose, the expenditure of funding, given that it is 3.1 million we're also talking about in total for the works on Tuffens Lane, essentially to use the fields as they always have been. So for me to spend at an ad hoc process and not consider it as part of the overall plan and the priorities and the risk factors according to those plans, I think we're actually out of step with the actual due process of what we should be doing. And I think it needs to go back into the review process for those action plans.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, this amendment, because I'm very comfortable with it. I have looked pretty closely and read between the lines, and I'm concerned that we need to weigh this up amongst all the other sporting projects we're trying to deliver for our community, which we can't and everybody wants. And I do think we need to go back through the process. We have a lot of things in the recreation plan. They've been through a process. We're trying to prioritise them. We're trying to get an outcome on funding and the like, but we need to weigh this up along with everything else. So thank you for your amendment. I support this, and I think everyone should.
Just as a matter of process, so my preference is certainly for what's on the table at the moment, but as a matter of process, I'd like to foreshadow a motion. So should this item be lost, that the amendment that I'd previously sent through be considered a foreshadowed motion, and once that's up, I'll speak to the motion on the table, if I may.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's fine. I'm going to speak against this motion that is here right now on the table. I'm absolutely blown away with the rationale behind this. We actually have seen a report in the Port News today criticising this council and previous councils for their lack of progress with our sporting infrastructure. I'm absolutely shocked today to be speaking against this motion. To say to our sporting community and a sporting field that brings in millions of dollars every year into our economy, to say, no, we're just going to leave this. We're just going to let you play on it with no drainage. We're not going to improve because we don't want to spend the money. Well, it's not about spending the money. It's about investing into our community. And I think our community is going to be absolutely gobsmacked when they hear this. And they will. They will hear about this because we have the media in the room. So, so disappointing. So very disappointing. That's all I have to say on the matter. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must admit, talk about bringing something to the table at the last minute. I thought we were actually looking at the wrong item there. To not invest into this infrastructure would be hideously disappointing for our community, our sporting community, our young kids. We all know that sporting infrastructure has been let to run to rack and ruin over the last 20 years. It's absolutely shocking to see this particular motion or amendment put forward. It is absolutely out of touch with the needs of the community and the wants of the community, but also the investment that's absolutely needed in our sporting infrastructure. I don't see anything wrong with the process to date. We've been very open and honest about the need to build into our community the infrastructure that can help with economic development and also as the support for our kids and our sporting bodies in particular. It's incredibly disappointing, it's very shocking, and I hope this absolutely fails.
Councillor Griffiths.
Question through you to Director Watkins. Director Watkins, I had a conversation with you earlier. Can you please advise the work that is proposed to be undertaken at Tuffens Lane presently? In other words, you know, that works aren't being entirely excluded.
Through you, Madam CEO, the works aren't going to stop. The drainage works just wouldn't proceed if your amendment is carried.
My question is, you said that there was going to be maintenance work undertaken. What would be that maintenance work?
Through you, Madam CEO, the works that are being undertaken are works to the amenities at the Tuffens Lane site. There's also drainage works that's been undertaken at the regional stadium, which have just been completed.
Councillor Shepherd.
Madam Mayor. So I'm speaking in support of this motion, and I understand that there might be perception that that's speaking against infrastructure, but I don't believe that's the case, and so I'd like to explain why. So as it stands, we have a recreational action plan that has been developed in consultation with our community to understand what it is that our community wants. We also have a list of sporting infrastructure priorities that have been developed, and notably on neither of those is Tuffens Lane. What is on it is, yes, you know, the aquatic centre and Thrumster sporting fields and whatnot, but most notably, given we're here, is the Hastings Regional Sporting Complex. So one of the issues is, if we're just going to pick out things that aren't strategic priorities, aren't a part of the priorities that have been identified in consultation with our community, is that we end up with a lot of ad hoc expenditure. That means we can't deliver on the priorities of our community. Now, I really want to focus on the issue of costs and specifically escalating costs. So I want to note that without even starting the design process, the estimated costs since last year have more than doubled, from about 1.5 million at that time to over $3 million. And we couldn't predict the future back then when we were making decisions, but we don't need to now. The huge price escalation has happened, and so now we consider it. So I urge my colleagues to support the continued use of Tuffens Lane, the continued maintenance, the improvement of the amenities that are very much needed. However, noting that price escalation that's already happened, noting that that's going to continue occurring, and noting that that comes at a cost of delivering on the actual priorities of our community in a methodical and strategic way, I commend my colleagues to consider please supporting this motion.
Councillor Interman.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I echo what Councillor Shepherd has said, and to note that, or to underline that this is not on our Recreation Action Plan. We have got too many things on our Recreation Action Plan that we haven't been able to decide what the priorities are, which is part of the reason why that, and lack of funding is part of the reason why there has been no progress. Absolutely, the Hastings sporting fields were proposed several years ago as an alternative to Tuffens, and that was in fact why we went down that path. Now that we've got Tuffens back again, yes, we can use it as it currently has been, as it currently is being used. I am very concerned about the acid sulphate soil implications, the serious flooding that's on that site, the fact that it is in the flight path for the airport. All of those things are very constraining in terms of how we use that site going forward and how we can use it. I perceive that the costs of fixing the drainage there is going to involve significant fill on that land because it is so low. Sporting fields traditionally were located, as were golf courses and caravan parks, traditionally located in places that were subject to drainage, and that was in fact felt to be a value add to the site. To invest let's say $3 to $7 million on Tuffens Lane, when that money could go to other priorities that are already on our list, I feel is really a serious deviation from our responsibilities, and all it does is add one more supposed priority to our growing list of priorities, with none of them then being achieved. There are exceptions to that, going down in Bonny Hills area, etc. But on our main priorities, none of them being achieved, and so therefore I support this. Yes, let's continue to use Tuffens. Yes, we've got it back into the fold, but the expense involved in developing that land is phenomenal and will prevent us from following through on other projects, more important, with greater need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Interman. Madam CEO, I just need to ask you, the bid that was put in for Touch, was that through Director Watkins?
It is.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask you a question here, Director Watkins. The bid that we put in for touch football that brings $13 odd million to our region, was the drainage and future upgrades to the field, a consideration for the Touch Association, in your understanding?
Through you, Madam CEO, upgrades were included in our submission. The upgrades were referring to the works we already had programmed in terms of the amenities and the works that we've just undertaken on the regional sports stadium. I don't know how much those works actually were incorporated into their decision-making process, but it was certainly clear that we were in the process of acquiring the land, so it was a positive outcome and a consideration, I would expect.
And one further question. So we have re-secured the senior touch football, which is held in December every year, but we are putting in a bid for the junior state touch football that happens in February each year. Do you think that the lack of drainage will be a consideration as far as the bid is concerned?
Through you, Madam CEO, I'm not sure how much weight it'll have in their decision making, but essentially they've awarded council the contract for the seniors for the State Cup based on the drainage works not actually being completed within that contract period.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Any other further discussion, councillors? Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking against. It's great to see how far we've come to not only securing Tuffens, but potentially today look at the potential of capitalising on this and to be able to play in all weather. It's known how heavily used these fields are and the economic benefits that have been pointed out that this brings. But more importantly for me, it's about the local sporting groups, in particular the kids, and making sure we keep them engaged. We've got different councils that are absolutely falling over themselves to try and secure these big competitions. So, we should be doing everything we can to try and keep them. No one's more of a fan, no one's more of a supporter than the Hastings Sporting Fields. The fact that we've got the potential to bring this up to speed, keep these competitions, the big ones in particular, I'm speaking against it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Slade. Any other discussion, councillors? No? Okay, well, I'll put it to the vote then. Those in favour? Councillor Interman, Edwards, Griffiths and Councillor Shepherd. Those against? Councillor Lipovac, Councillor Slade, Councillor Maltman, Councillor Roberts and myself. Thank you. The amendment's been lost. So we do have foreshadowed. You'd like to move that?
Thank you. I'll move that. Do I need to read it first before seconder?
I'm happy to second it.
Right. Okay. Up there. Just making sure we've got it on the screen. There we go. Thank you. That Council 1, note the information provided in this report. 2, consider including funding for the detailed design works to the value of $200,000 in the draft 2023-2024 operational plan and budget. 3, request the Chief Executive Officer to prepare a communications plan to all stakeholder user groups outlining the steps involved in the proposed drainage works, the estimated time frame, estimated costs, known risks and potential impacts on the delivery of other sporting infrastructure priorities. 4, request that should Council determine to include the funding for the detailed design works to the value of $200,000 in the draft 23-24 operational plan and budget, that the communications plan outlined in point 3 be implemented as part of the public exhibition of the draft operational plan to facilitate informed community feedback on the proposal to progress drainage works. And 5, that Council receive a further report in regards to the outcome of consultation on this matter as part of the draft operational plan engagement report.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. So at present, there has actually been no consultation with our community on this specific issue of whether to proceed with $3.1 million worth of investment in a sporting infrastructure that is not identified anywhere in our priorities. So while there has been lots of coverage of particular perspectives of the importance of Tuffens Lane and the potential for drainage works, the community, as I see it, has not actually yet been informed of the significant estimated costs, the known risks or the impacts that this would likely have on the delivery of our other sporting infrastructure, and so has not had the opportunity to say yes or no. Most notably, those community groups and those sporting venues that don't realise that they might be impacted, that funds might be redirected away from delivering things like the Hastings Regional Sporting Complex, don't realise that they are a stakeholder who has interest in this and may want to give input. Some of the costs and risks that I anticipate would be involved in the public exhibition so that our community can make informed responses in the operational plan include that the processing costs requires, yes, $3.1 million in total. That's $200,000 initially for a detailed design. Then the next stage is a development approval and environmental impact statement at a cost of $500,000. And once we get to the end of that point, some of the things that would be impacted are the environmental constraints, such as the fact it's a floodplain that we're looking to put drainage into. the acid sulphate soils, which will absolutely affect environmental approvals and potentially result in extremely expensive mitigation measures in order to progress. So that's $700,000 up to that point, after which we might be told this is going to be too expensive and it's a no-go. And then on top of that, you've got the construction costs, upward of $2 million, 150K in project management, and then also contingency monies allowed also. So those are some of the costs, some of the risks associated, and that's not even talking about the risk of the funds being redirected from other existing, identified, community-consulted sporting priorities of our community. I tend to think that once all of this information is available to our community, and maybe I'm a bit idealistic. I often think that if everyone has the facts in front of them, that they'll come to a really sound decision. And I often get told that I'm a bit idealistic in thinking that's the case. But I think if we can get some really solid engagement and consultation with the facts available to community members to balance out the costs and benefits here, that we are going to be able to make a far better decision, which I suspect will not be in support of progressing at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Any other discussion? Councillor Littleback.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You'll understand that I'm probably a little bit conflicted with this particular issue, but I am speaking in support of Deputy Mayor Shepherd's amendment. And I certainly do understand the concerns being raised over such a significant financial investment that will be required over many years to come, but I would also like to make the following clear. The Tuffens Lane precinct has been a big part of my life for over the past 20 years for me and my kids, via junior and senior cricket, state cup touch football, social touch and junior football or soccer. As a player, a parent, a coach, team manager and a club committee member, I've got many fond memories of that venue. I spoke up against council with other sporting groups when it was sold to private developers, and we all cheered when the church took over. But let's take the emotion out of it, call it as it is. When it's dry, Tuffens is the perfect venue to cater for multiple sports all year round. Its greatest asset is its size. But when it gets a bit wet, it becomes a frustrating, useless cow paddock. I certainly don't want the venue to become a money pit. Nobody wants that. No one wants to go down the road of Glasshouse. But new venues in Wauchope and Thrumster and existing venues in Laurelton, Lake Cadai and at Wayne Richards also deserve their fair share of council money. Now, having voted for the purchase of Tuffens late last year, I naturally want to ensure every effort is made to utilise the venue, upgrade it and improve its ability to handle some wet weather, even though there are various factors working against it. But while we wait for additional fields to become available, and that could be several years, for example, the development of the Hastings Sporting Precinct in Wauchope was put forward by council more than 15 years ago. And with Macquarie Park making way for the new aquatic centre, we need to ensure we have a venue, a backup venue, an insurance policy that we can use for our growing population. There'll be more sports, more teams, more recreational activities. We can't afford not to spend money on Tuffens. We also can't afford to waste it on behalf of the community we represent. In the meantime, we need to make Tuffens a priority and to speed up the process, if possible, of getting work done, not just for the benefit of a couple of big events each year, but for all users across the Hastings. So at this stage, I'm not prepared to give up on the future of Tuffens Lane. So let's agree to putting this amendment through, communicating our plans with all stakeholders, get the detailed info required, make an informed decision on how we move forward. There is so much to gain, but I also understand there's much to lose if we don't get this right. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Littleback. I'm going to speak to this. I'm not conflicted, and I'm just so pleased that some actual common sense is going to prevail here, and we're going to continue forward. Totally agree that communities should be involved in all of that as well. But let's remember why we do this is for community. We manage community assets for community, and you can go to Port News today and you can have a look at the stories about the fact that we are being left behind here in the Port Macquarie region, as opposed to a council just up the road from us, Coffs Harbour City Council, who seems to be able to get their sporting infrastructure upgraded and invest money into it. Why don't we? Because we don't make it a priority. It hasn't been a priority. And decisions like these about not moving forward and upgrading infrastructure, and I am quoted today in the paper saying that this isn't just about touch football here. This is about our codes that use this field 365 days a year. They need this field drained because it is a useless cow paddock when we get high volumes of rain. And let's face facts, we've just had 2 days of extremely high volume. We don't have the money to do everything everywhere, but we have this sporting field. This sporting field is used as a sporting field, and absolutely a priority should be given to the Tuffens Lane Sporting Precinct about how we're going to move forward into the future and upgrade it. And I'm just absolutely relieved that, 5 councillors actually saw sense in this. And this is what we're discussing now, so thank you. Any other? Councillor Mortman.
A question through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Watkins. Is the reason why Tuffens Lane didn't feature in our plans because we didn't own it?
Madam CEO, that's correct.
There we go. Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, through you, question to Director Watkins. Was there also not proposed an agreement that was meant to be actually undertaken with the Catholic Church that never ever was resolved? So essentially there was actually an understanding that Council was at some point going to do some upgrade of amenities and the maintenance work actually in particular was what that was.
Through you, Madam CEO, I'm not sure of the details of the agreement you're referring to, but Council certainly has been maintaining the amenities and the grounds for ever since the church owned it and purchased it. So the ongoing maintenance has been a cost borne by Council since that time.
Okay, any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I'm going to speak for this amendment and thank Councillor Shepherd for finding a way forward. I can support this because the community is going to have all the information that we're trying to weigh up to make such an important decision with such a big amount of money that might really change priorities and it might hold other things up. The community needs to absolutely know about that. So I do support this motion. I really, personally, I've read through, and between the lines, I'm very worried that the environment there probably isn't going to allow these drainage works anyway. But look, at least we can go out and the community can weigh that up too. They can have all the information and work out, do they think, spending $200 here on designs and then another $500 on environmental studies is going to be a waste of $700,000 to find out we can't? Or is that what they want to do? They want to progress that and see how it turns out. So thanks, Councillor Shepherd, for this amendment. I can support this on the basis of the community having all the information and being able to have their input into the OP.
Councillor Morton.
I'm in opposition of this. I just think it delays continually. I'm just wondering if Council's actually had a look at the Port News today. I've just had a look at it myself. Where Touch is saying the timeline, they're talking about the timeline being the issue. It's completely at Tuffens Lane may throw fresh doubt on the region's bid to regain touch football's junior state touch. And, Port Macquarie Touch Association President Wayne Prince said he's confident that the Tuffens Lane drainage works will be done in a timely manner. For my mind, if this motion goes through, that's not the case, so I won't be supporting it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Morton. Councillor Interman.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I can, following that comment, I can only reiterate that we have not got unlimited funds for sporting. We have to make some priorities. I absolutely could not have supported the staff recommendation that we allocate money to next year's budget now because we didn't have all the information available, and also it conflicts with our priorities. Are we committed to moving the pool? In which case we've got to find an alternative for Macquarie Park. We cannot do everything at once and have to actually decide on our priorities. We cannot decide whether or not Tuffen is a priority until we get the information that's going to come out of this motion. In terms of whether or not we disappoint people or not, we as councillors always need to keep in mind that proper process is a big part of our remit here, and to make sure that decisions are made in an orderly manner. This enables a decision to be made in an orderly manner bearing in mind we have so many other priorities on sporting. Nobody wants to deny the kids and keep them engaged. We want to have a series of sporting facilities that do meet the needs of the community, but within our means. We can't just keep adding to the list and hoping that people will be satisfied with a juggling act that goes on about which one comes first. But again, I really need to speak to the relationship between council and the state government and the federal government, and there just doesn't seem to be a commitment on their part to be realistic about where they put their money. Are they only going to put their money where they feel that it's a winnable seat, or are they actually going to be committed to the needs of their communities going forward? We need state and federal funding in order to complete our sporting priorities, but we don't need an extra priority that's not actually one of our priorities, if that makes sense. I support this recommendation, this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really don't know about this, to be honest. I just see Tuffens Lane as a bit of a sinkhole. I think not only is it just the drainage issue, you've got parking issues out there. It's again only been upgraded to a 1 in 20. So if other fields are closed, then that field will also be closed. It's not like it's going to be an all-weather purpose, field. Essentially, at 75mm rainfall, it'll be shut down. If the junior touch football is at the time of year when we've got high rainfall, then again, 7 of 8 has been, it didn't happen previously, so why will that be any change? So again, I just think this is a big sinkhole, and I'm quite concerned about just putting money on the table and not understanding more about where that's all going to lead. But partly as well because I think we need to go back to the strategies. If we're going to identify strategies and understand our future sporting needs, we need to, if that's what we want, to have a dry field facility, then we need to find that location and actually provide for that. We need to be more strategic in what we do, and again, not just identify in an ad hoc process on, we're just going to go and do drainage work on Tuffens because we've bought it. Well, essentially, if it's been operating for the last 30 years under this current arrangement, my kids also went and played in those fields, so, on a regular basis, and I don't remember too many times, I actually don't remember not going to those fields and playing.
So, Councillor Griffiths, are you speaking for or against?
I hadn't decided, to be honest.
I need you to decide.
Wow.
You're on your feet. You're either speaking for or against.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, I'm not sure. I know that this has come up several times, but I think all that it says in the Code of Conduct, Code of Meeting Practice, is that you can only speak for or against an amendment or a motion once. Councillor Griffiths can make her mind up later.
Thank you, Councillor Interman, but I think for all of us to have clarity about where you're headed, are you speaking for or against the motion? It's just a simple question.
I'll just say for.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask a question here? Because I want to be clear about this, based off what you've said, Councillor Mortman. The words consider including funding for the detailed design works in this operational plan that we're about to go into budget for. Is it your intent, Councillor Shepherd, that the consideration be given for this money to be included? What does consider mean to you?
What I mean is exactly what I've said, that it is considered. It is considered for inclusion in the draft operational plan. And
Pending the engagement?
No. So.
That's where I was coming from.
Yeah, thank you. What you've clarified, because I wasn't sure if Councillor Mortman actually understood what you had actually said. So I wanted to clarify to you, consideration is consider including it in the draft operational plan when we send it out to community consultation to get feedback on that.
Yes, that they would be able to give input on the draft OP.
Yeah, thank you.
Which would then receive the report back, of course, at which stage we'll be able to make a decision moving forward from there.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I did ask that because I got the impression that Councillor Mortman didn't
And that was correct.
understand that.
Yeah.
So thank you. Councillor Intiman.
Question, Madam Mayor, just following on from that. I think the intent is that we do include it, and so, like in the draft budget, and so therefore I will, I'll put up some words for an amendment, and you might take it in. So I'm just going to suggest we change to include in the include funding for the detailed design works to the value of blah blah in the blah blah clause there. Just make it include. And Councillor Shepherd, I'll move that as an amendment, and Councillor Shepherd might take it on board.
If I may ask a question through you, Madam Mayor, to you, Madam CEO, through to Director Watkins. Director Watkins, can you advise if that changes the outcome of that clause?
Through you, Madam CEO, as Council haven't actually seen the draft OP, because it hasn't been presented to Council, it would be part of the consideration of the draft OP when it comes back to Council in April.
Yes, so I would like to return to the original wording, which is to consider including.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Bearing in mind the response from Director Watkins, I'm happy to withdraw that amendment.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other discussion? Right, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think what this highlights is that the job's not done in making sure this project comes to fruition insofar as the absolute upgrade that is very much needed. So at the moment, I think we're looking at considerations and obviously budget costs coming up and an opportunity for the community to actually make comment on that. I would absolutely encourage every sporting club or group associated with Tuffens Lane to come out in numbers and support the councillors that want to see this happen on this one. Put your feedback in, because without your feedback, we don't have a lot to work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Right of reply.
Thank you. So there's a few points throughout the debate that I would like to give some emphasis or clarity to. One is to clarify that the works are not at all suggested to create an all-weather playing field. In fact, they'll be rated to 75 mils, which in my understanding would have resulted in the cancellation of many of the previous events that occur in the wettest month anyway, which is of course when the juniors is on. So it's very important to note that this is not all weather, 75 mils, it'll be closed. I also want to clarify in regards to the, any articles we might have seen in the Port News or any other media, that in fact up until now, the information contained in this report, while we might have been certainly aware of a number of these risks and constraints, that has not been previously available to our community, nor to the media. So this is the first time that they're getting to see this and actually getting to see a balanced consideration of the factors that are on the table. And so, and I think that's a really critical point. We can't be bagging out too much in this instance when there hasn't been information available. There's also the point being made that other adjacent councils have been able to deliver significant sporting priorities. And I would suggest that is because they've had clearly defined priorities that they've been able to communicate to their state and federal members. There hasn't been any evidence, or certainly less evidence than the varying priorities or ad hoc things that we might have had picked out, which I think Tuffens is an example of personally. The final point I would make is that it's really important here that we're making sure that this public exhibition reaches all relevant stakeholders. And the point is that's not just those people who use Tuffens. I also grew up playing soccer on Tuffens. Maybe my young one will as well. But the point is I now play soccer at Wauchope, and think about the sporting facilities available out this direction. So it's really important that we're not just focusing engagement on those who use Tuffens and of course want it to keep on being a high level of usability. We also need to make sure that we're getting feedback from those other parties, those other stakeholders who would be impacted by the redirection of $3.1 million to this project.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Those again, so we have Councillor Intiman, Lipovac, Shepherd, Sorry, I'll ask it again. All those in favour? Councillor Interman, Lipovac, Edwards, Shepherd, Slade, Maltman, Roberts and myself. Those against? Councillor Griffiths, I'll declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on now to item 11.03, recommended items from the Port Macquarie Hastings Sporting Fund Subcommittee. It's a sports kind of day. Someone to move, thank you. Moved by Councillor Roberts, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Slade, thank you. Do we have discussion on this? No? All right, I'll put the motion to vote then. All those in favour? Thank you. I see none against. I'll declare that carried. Item 11.04, Port Macquarie Hastings Sports Council. Someone to move. Moved by Councillor Roberts. Seconded by Councillor Slade. Thank you. Councillor Interman.
I have an amendment, please. The amendment is there. Just need a seconder.
Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. We received a draft terms of reference for the Sports Council. In discussion with Director Watkins, it became apparent that. So I had concerns with it because it was talking about priorities, and here again it seemed like we were handing over responsibility to a group rather than us making the decision. And in discussion, I believe Councillor Shepherd had with Director Watkins, it was realised that in fact that wasn't quite what the intention was. And so we need to clarify this, and so I'm asking that we note the report, that we request a workshop so that we can talk about it and decide actually what we want to do with this, because the draft terms of reference says something different to what I believe the intentions are. So let's all get clear before we start down this path. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Interman. I did have discussions with the relevant director, and I do feel there's very confident that there's value in pursuing a sports council to efficiently achieve a range of purposes, and based around a framework that has proven successful in other communities and councils. But without going into detail, I don't feel that the terms of reference presented to us will achieve that, and that I do feel confident that with a short workshop with councillors, that the purpose and intent of that sports council would yield a superior outcome.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just speaking against this one, I just see this as something that we could actually move forward with the current information provided. I just see point 3 in particular just delaying something that I think we're all trying to work towards. We've just heard about priorities needing to be readjusted or sorted out or worked through. I think the best people to do that is community members and also the staff that do have all the information as well, and then present something to us as councillors to make a decision on after that. So the people that need to be involved, I think, are well covered in the terms of reference. I just see this as a bit of a delay that's, in my view, unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Edwards?
Yeah. Thanks, Madam Mayor. No, I'm going to speak for this amendment because I went through the terms of reference and I felt there were too many contradictions. It wasn't clear. I think it does need some reworking to make sure we get something that we really were after and something that's of value.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No? Right of reply?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I hear what Councillor Roberts says about moving forward. Well, I don't want to move forward in a direction that we aren't actually intending to go with this Sports Council. We need to get this clear before we take the step of going for further expressions of interest and appointing members. And the terms of reference are not clear. The terms of reference are perhaps suggesting something more that Councillor Roberts had thought was going to be in there, that these groups are setting priorities. That was certainly never my understanding. This needs to be a good consultation venue and to set for discussions amongst sporting groups as to use of fields, where do we need, do we need to swap around rosters? What are the more operational needs of the sporting clubs? Certainly, let's get their advice on their input on priorities. But that's not the purpose of the council. If that was the purpose, they would come back to us. There would be all sorts with their priorities, and there'd be all sorts of discussion then about how does that fit in with decisions we've made about sporting priorities going forward. It is pointless to make a decision that we're only going to have to unravel and start again. This enables us to go forward clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will put the amendment to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Interman, Lipovac, Edwards, Griffiths and Shepherd. Those against? Councillor Slade, Maltman, Roberts and myself. Thank you. The amendment is now the motion. Any further discussion, councillors?
Yes,
Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, so I would like to clarify that certainly the terms of reference I feel were not clear. And one of the outcomes that came from last year we determined, I didn't support it, but it was the decision of council to disband a number of subcommittees and other groups, dozens of community members, and a part of, without review. And so a part of what I felt was important at that stage was to engage to some extent in the capacity I had with some review of, in fact, how they'd been operating. And what I learned from that was certainly there were some committees that weren't operating particularly efficiently or effectively, or ways that community members seemed particularly happy with. However, they gave very good feedback about that. And a part of that feedback was having a very clear understanding of what our purpose is. And so for me, when I read the objectives written in the terms of reference for this particular group, it is not clear to me exactly what they would be achieving. And so I think there's a very, very high risk what would occur is a council resource committee where people are coming together, developing different expectations about what is going to be achieved, which ultimately council can't deliver on. I don't think that's the right way we need to go, and so I want to make sure that we've got something super tight, super clear, so that our communities and anyone who chooses to engage with that to really help us with some current and emerging issues relevant to sports, that our community can be really confident we're going to move in a sound direction with that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Any other discussion? I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Interman, Lipovac, Edwards, Griffiths, Shepherd. Those against? Councillor Slade, Maltman, Roberts and myself. Thank you. I'll declare that carried. All right, we'll move on now to item number 11.5, the draft policy, community leasing and licensing policy post public exhibition. Someone to move?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you.
Noting, Madam Mayor, that I've got a non-pecuniary less than significant interest. I'm still moving it.
Thank you very much. A seconder? Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Thank you. Any discussion on this? No discussion, councillors? Okay, it was brought out of the block. All right, I'll put the motion to the vote then.
Because I have an interest,
Madam
Mayor.
Interest, thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? I see none against. Thank you. I declare that carried. Item 12.01, notice of motion rate freeze 2023-24. Thank you, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to read this one, if I may.
Yes, you can.
That Council requests the Chief Executive Officer prepare, as part of the integrated planning and reporting process, a draft operational plan for the 2023-2024 financial year that freezes the ordinary and special rates, excluding the Town Centre Master Plan component of the Port Macquarie CBD ordinary business rate at the 2022-23 level. 2, request the Chief Executive Officer model the impact of freezing ordinary and special rates at the 2022-23 levels for the period 1 July 2023 to 30 June 2025 inclusive, and that a report is returned to the April 2023 Ordinary Council meeting that addresses how the financial impact of the rate freeze may be mitigated. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to second. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure all of us at the bench here can read, but for the benefit of the gallery or public who may not have the document in front of them, I'm just going to read my comments. As part of the 2021 local government elections for the Port Macquarie Hastings Council, Mayor Peter Pinson took a number of key priority items to the community, including a return to core services, a focus on delivery of key and critical infrastructure in water, sewer and roads in particular. A core promise, if elected with a majority, was also to deliver an economic recovery strategy aimed at financially assisting the local government area, in particular our ratepayers and businesses following the preceding years of drought, floods, bushfires and the pandemic. In the aforementioned 2021 elections, Mayor Pinson was elected with a significant majority as popular mayor, and her whole team Pinson, consisting of myself, Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Maltman, Councillor Slade, were elected. It is very fair to say that the mayor's vision and well-articulated plans were adopted by the community given the results of the election. A particular element of the economic recovery strategy was to freeze general rates for the full elected term, which was, at the time, just under 3 years. This rate freeze plan was intended to aid ratepayers and to also place pressure on the council organisation to look inward for cost savings and to become more efficient in every aspect of what we do. The rates freeze was also aimed at forcing the organisation to live within its means, particularly given the ballooning cash reserves which had grown year on year over the last decade. Promises made before an election should be kept. Not only should they be kept, but they should be fought for in the face of pushback or opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I'm going to speak to this. So, item 10.3, we talked about investments and loans just in February alone in 2023, and I raised a few things. And I did that not just to note the report and note some of the information that was in there. I wanted to bring it to the fore because I knew it was going to be important when we were discussing this. Some of the highlights are these aggressive rate hikes that have been undertaken by the RBA. And the one thing people are talking about within our community, amongst anything else, is the cost of living. And in the report back in item 10.03, it also highlighted an expectation by the RBA in their aggressive rate hiking to try and get a control on inflation, was that there possibly was going to be another 2 to 3 additional 25 base point increases over the months ahead. Let me tell you, we have a community that is in distress financially, and that is going to continue. And we are going to see people in a great deal of distress if the RBA does hike another 2 interest rates. People are already paying $1,000 a month more on their mortgages in an area like this. And that means that money that they were spending in other areas isn't being spent, which means our businesses are going to start suffering. The other thing in the report acknowledged an investment strategy to mitigate risk because we need to have safe harbour against a potential recession environment. So council are worrying about a safe harbour, but what about the safe harbour for our community who are going to really start to see the effects, and especially when some of these mortgage holders come off their fixed rate interest? We're going to be in some significant strife, and we're in a regional area here, and there's not much fat on the lamb anymore, let me tell you. I commend you, Councillor Roberts, for standing firm to the promise that we made to this community. And I think to break a promise, it should never be made in the first place if your intention is to break it. I fully support this. And this organisation has been doing a really good job under your stewardship and under the director's leadership of living within its means and becoming much more efficient than I've ever seen this council operate in the almost 6 years here as mayor. So for that reason, thank you, and I commend it to the other councillors here. Thank you.
I'd like to foreshadow a motion should this motion be lost and take the liberty of reading it. Yes. Okay, so request the CEO to prepare as part of the IP&R process a draft OP for the 2023-2024 financial year that incorporates the New South Wales rate peg increase for the ordinary and special rates, excluding the TCMP component of the Port Macquarie CBD business rate. Number 2, note the following. A, The impact on council rate income from a one-year rate freeze in the 23-24 financial year would be a reduction of approximately $2.6 million revenue from the ordinary rate during that year, with a cumulative impact across 10 years of approximately $32 million. B, that approximately 69% of council's operational costs support core operations of council are fixed and cannot be readily reduced without reducing services and staffing. As a result, potential operational impacts of a rate freeze would need to consider the following areas: parks and gardens, including sporting fields; selective reductions in the level of maintenance and frequency of parks and gardens and sporting fields. In regards to transport, selective reductions in operational maintenance, drainage works, road resealing, bridge investigative and preventative maintenance, leading to potential safety issues and degradation of assets. That's transport. General works, revenue-funded projects would need to be reprioritised with delivery timeframes potentially slowed down or deferred. C, that council is directly addressing long-term financial sustainability by undertaking a general fund improvement plan with a 3 to 5 year horizon for implementation, which could be accelerated with additional resource allocation. D, that the benefit of a one-year rate freeze on residential ratepayers would equate to a rate reduction of approximately $60 for the year, on average, depending on land valuation.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd, someone to second?
I believe we don't need a seconder until
thank you.
The motion is required.
Thank you.
Question,
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Sorry.
through you to the CEO, in relation to rate relief and rate relief in regards to hardship, could you advise or could the relevant director advise what would be the process for community members who are in a place of hardship to access rate relief?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Director Henschke, if you want to give the response. It's basically a form that gets filled in, and we then assess that in terms of their financial hardship at its basic level. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say? No?
Through Madam CEO, there's also through Service New South Wales, there's a magnitude of rebate for pension low income families. So I think there's options there, and obviously we'll see that where that lands with change with where the state election ends up as well in terms of the support for that.
Councillor Intiman.
We're speaking on the motion?
Yes, we are.
Yep. Speak against the motion. I understand that some people thought that this was a good idea and ran for election on it. However, we've received repeated instances of the kinds of information that Deputy Mayor Shepherd has just enumerated, as well as opinion from expert people in the field who have been engaged to advise council, and their very, very strong recommendation was that 1 year of a rate freeze was maybe manageable, but more years is going to lead us into severe financial distress, severe financial distress, and our inability to establish and maintain financial sustainability as we are required to. There are those in the community who don't believe that, and they are entitled to their opinion, but I, as councillor and in this room, we should be taking all the information that we get and the quality of that information to be taken into account, and I certainly cannot support this motion because it is, in fact, representing a danger to the financial sustainability of the council going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Shepherd.
Speaking against, thank you. So just briefly, in the foreshadowed motion, I've included key information that I feel our community would want to know when deciding if a rate freeze is on balance going to be of benefit to them. So a part of my issue with the motion before us is that I think if our community, again, had accurate information about the costs and benefits involved, we would be seeing something very different. So I think that they would agree that that a rate freeze is not financially responsible or a desirable way forward for our community. And I don't think that they would agree that a $60 saving for the average ratepayer is worth the cost to infrastructure and service delivery or the impact that it would have on council's financial sustainability. So I certainly didn't come into council with a key interest in financial sustainability or governance, but I came to prioritise that extremely quickly. Because the reality is council's core business is about delivering critical infrastructure. Yes, roads and the rubbish services, but we've got water and sewer infrastructure too. And if we're not financially sustainable, we can't deliver that. So financial sustainability is absolutely top of the list for me. And the briefings that we received last year, certainly independent subject matter experts who were brought in, we paid them to give us advice about how to best move forward in financial sustainability, and they told us not to do a rate freeze then, and if we did do one, definitely don't do it again, you know, so that they told us that pretty clearly. But that's probably not really what our community is that interested in. I think they're most interested in, well, if we're going to save only $60, what are the costs that we're having to bear? Well, some of the information I think they'd find relevant. For Port Macquarie Hastings Council, the New South Wales allowed rate peg increase of 4.7% is not even enough to cover our increases in the statutory award increases. It's not enough to cover our electricity cost increases, and that's not taking into account all of the other inflation-related costs. So the rate peg doesn't even cover those. And that includes our population growth factor that they gave to us because we're growing so quick. It's not enough. Now, the current levels of inflation mean that costs in general have been and will continue to rise greater than the rate peg limit. So this has actually led a number of other councils to apply for a special rate variation either last year or in this year simply to maintain service levels. So to be clear, our council is not applying for a special rate variation. In very simple terms, freezing rates just isn't consistent with the financial sustainability of our council. So I do think I would have liked to speak a bit longer as to the operational impacts of a rate freeze, but I understand my time is also up. But nonetheless, I urge councillors to consider, even from a community standpoint, whether the $60 benefit the average ratepayer, not resident, but ratepayer, would save, is that really worth the costs that we're going to have to face as a result?
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, just quickly, I think we have to take into consideration the current circumstances. I actually believe it would be irresponsible of council to support this motion, as there are various reasons why. Decisions are based on ad hoc approach currently, and with the inclusion of a rate freeze, if approved, has a potential for a negative impact on social sustainability, which Deputy Mayor Rachel Shepherd has identified, but my rough estimate was $6 million in 1 year, but extrapolated is $18 million without considering the compounding costs. So again, I don't know that we're in the position to be actually looking at those increased costs and losses against our budgets. Council needs to follow an approval process based on risk and priority. Feedback was received against rate freeze previously as incremental rises are manageable. It was feared that later community would be hit with higher rates, which would be more difficult to manage. The increase in base rate for 3 years was $26.70 on my rate notice, which is not significant. Waste costs have increased due to unforeseeable issues, and council will be soon considering waste options and whether we can improve on that process. Geopolitical impact has caused delays in supply and impacted current increases on council's materials and contracts at around 15%. And again, if you want to consider interest that we're receiving, again, that's not sufficient to cover these increases in cost. We have a $340 million spend that is due in the near future, with a shortfall in funding for development contributions works and many other community items that people have been waiting for some time, including infrastructure backlog, landslides, unfunded stormwater issues. A rate rise is not the same, does not have the same meaning as a rate freeze. Rate rise refers to special rate variation, which was looking at 52.4%. I did recognise that the organisation should improve on efficiencies and effectiveness before asking community for additional money, noting that relief has been provided to community for flooding and other significant events. I would suggest to all councillors to not support this motion as would not be in the best interest of the community.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Mortman.
I support this motion. I actually came in on the Mayor's ticket, as everyone's aware, and we made a commitment for a 3-year rate freeze, which I wholeheartedly support. Councillors here today, the community expects you to, your due diligence and also to have their best interests at heart. In the middle of a financial crisis, actually whether it's in the middle or the end or whatever, the community is calling out for assistance financially. I've had that many representations, and thanks for putting through another rate increase. Don't roll your eyes, Sharon, because it's actually true. So, yeah, good on you. So what I will say is that those representations are real, and our community is calling out for councillor support, and I hope you make a decision today to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mortman. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I'd like to start by saying, regardless of whose ticket anyone came in on, each of us as councillors have our responsibilities, and you can look up your IPART roles and responsibilities to check that. Ensure, as far as possible, the financial sustainability of the council. I'm going to give a bit of context and a bit of background for everybody. Back in 2020, actually, the Australian Local Government Association back then was saying rate peg was hindering councils' ability to build new infrastructure. Quite clearly, the New South Wales Productivity Commission said that except for raising user charges or extracting developer contributions, councils don't have alternate funding sources needed to service higher populations and to maintain and operate a larger capital stock. It even says here that this leaves councils in a position where they may need to lower the services to their existing ratepayers and to their new residents. That in turn explains why councils have collected infrastructure contributions and may be unwilling to invest them. The operation and maintenance of new infrastructure will impose additional costs for which there is no funding. So do you spend it when it's not going to complete it, or do you just hold it and try to get enough money to actually complete and do and deliver the works? So there's a nice explainer here about the reserves at Port Macquarie Hastings Council for you to understand that. This explains quite well the background for why Port Macquarie Hastings Council's effort, tried to convey that to us in that document. In 2021-2022, the rate peg was 2%. And even then, the Australian Local Government Association said, the new peg will go some way to helping local governments continue to provide services and maintain infrastructure critical to our communities, but it won't allow them to mitigate against the additional costs incurred following this extended drought, bushfires, floods and COVID. So even then, a 2% rate peg wasn't enough. So carry on to the next year, and what a shock to find out 0.7% was the rate peg. It was shockingly low, the lowest it's been in 20 years. No other council has implemented a rate freeze in this term of council. Rather, about 17 councils have applied for special rate variations to go beyond the rate peg. Now, Port Macquarie Hastings Council has been awarded a 4.7% rate peg, which takes into account now population growth. It never used to do that. And we're seeing huge influx. We are actually, we're the 7th highest in New South Wales. Our growth rate is huge, and it's being recognised, and that's why our rate peg is going to be recommended at 4.7. We need it. We cannot deliver for the community without it. We cannot be financially sustainable. We're not being responsible if we do anything other than take up the rate peg.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Any other discussion? Thank you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Also speaking against, as Councillor Edwards just mentioned, our rate rise for the new financial year being at 4.7%. So just in comparison, local councils in our region, costs looking at a rise of 3.8, Kempsey 3.7, Midcoast 3.9, Bellingen 4.5%. So at this point in time, as mentioned, no other council in New South Wales is considering implementing a rate freeze. As we are aware, to implement a rate freeze would force council to cut back on services, on programs, and potentially further cuts to staffing levels as well. 17, as we've heard, New South Wales councils have applied for a special rate variation That's above the suggested rate peg amount, the rate peg amount being 3.7. 17 councils have applied for a special rate for the next financial year. Some of the figures include asking for this percentage rate increase for their ratepayers. Canada Bay, 15.49%. Armidale, 16.67%. Bega Valley, 24% rise in their rates. I think our ratepayers would prefer their 4.7% over the next financial year compared to some of our other councils in New South Wales. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lippavack. So I just need to go back up to where we're at. Okay, so everyone has spoken. Right of reply. Are you okay over there? Yes? Right of reply, Councillor Roberts.
Last call.
No? Right of reply. Thank you, Councillor Roberts.
Trying to do the right thing, Madam Mayor. So we've heard a lot of commentary and what I might frame as anecdotal evidence that we absolutely cannot afford this. I just want to draw councillors' attention to item 2, in particular the words model the impact. And they're the operative words there from what I'm proposing here. Modelling the impact so that all of the community can see that and all of the community can make an informed assessment and judgment on whether they want to support it or not. So irrespective of the words I put in the actual agenda, that was for history, but we need to look to the future. We do absolutely have some economic circumstances which are not conducive to strong economic growth and development, and we are absolutely having multiple people contact us as councillors, if we're available, saying that they are under some financial strain and they absolutely would love whatever assistance we could offer. We're talking about, if you take the comments from the foreshadowed motion, $2.6 million. I haven't qualified that. I'd like to see that in a report and the rationale for that, but also how that figure was arrived at. So on that point in particular, it could be $2.6 million against a budget of last year, if we look back, $288 million. So we're talking less than 2%. So I don't know what the big problem is. Looking at modelling the impact of freezing the ordinary and special rates, it's a bit of paperwork, but at the end of the day, if you're voting this one down, you're saying the community doesn't deserve to see that information, and that's the way I'm reading it. So on that, I absolutely request councillors have a good think about this in the next few seconds as to whether you want to prevent the community seeing the rationale and the absolute detail behind this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Okay, I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Slade, Maltman, Roberts, myself. Those against? Councillor Interman, Lippavack, Edwards, Griffiths and Shepherd. Thank you. The motion's been lost. We have the foreshadowed.
I'll move the foreshadowed motion.
Thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Griffiths, thank you.
Thank you. I won't read it again, but I do just want to, off the back of those final comments, in regards to getting information in front of our community to be able to see what the impacts of a rate freeze would be. So in fact, last year, before we had a rate freeze, we did that exact same thing, and we received a report and it told us exactly what a number of councillors have spoken to just here today. So to be honest, I don't see the point in receiving a report if, as has occurred on a number of previous circumstances, we're just going to ignore that report anyway. So since we already have very, very clear information in front of us that's been provided by subject matter experts, we've got some basic answers projecting the impact into the future, and I think we can rely on those. A part of my assessment of the fact that we can rely on that $2.6 million revenue loss this year and the projection of very early estimate, 10 years, $32 million, is that last year when we received projections from staff, the initial answer was exactly the same as the answer we got after the in-depth modelling was done, and we were given answers in the final report. I would also note that as a result of last year's IPNR voting, we determined to proceed with a general fund improvement plan. Now, our general fund operating result is one of our biggest indicators of financial sustainability, and what we have is very, very clear data that shows us our general fund operating result is going to be in consecutive deficits very soon. Our borrowing is going to be significantly limited very soon. Our external reserves are going to be exhausted very soon. So it is very, very important that we are focused as councillors on our financial sustainability, and we have information in front of us that's very clearly there to advise us. Now, just to return briefly to what the community would be interested in terms of the impacts on operational delivery of a rate freeze. So what we're looking at is in parks of gardens, a rate freeze would likely result in selective reductions in levels of maintenance and frequency. So we're looking at, instead of 6 to 8 weeks out weekly mowing, 12 to 14 weeks. So we'd be looking at limited to no garden maintenance. We'd be looking at sports field management going from weekly to every 3 to 4 weeks. So if we're looking at other actions that would be taken, and I've received these answers, what else could we potentially do to mitigate these actions? And they've already looked at them all because they had to try and work out what to do last year as well. So transport, selective reductions in operational maintenance, general works, revenue-funded projects that would need to be prioritised. So we're talking about things that are revenue-funded, like alternative access, investigation design for the health and education precinct near the hospital. The Illaroo Coastal Hazard Management. Yeah, we'd be looking at these ones, needing to do some reprioritising. Stormwater infrastructure, tree maintenance, Brill Road, a whole list of things like this. So it has very real consequences, and I think that this is the appropriate way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Griffiths, did you wish to speak to this? Anyone else wish to speak to this? Councillor Inchman?
Thanks, Councillor Shepherd. I applaud you for bringing forward the fact that we all knew last year that this data that we are considering now was pretty much all brought to us last year. So it's a furphy to suggest that we're making a decision now without the appropriate data. I'd also like to bring to people's attention that reprioritise, which was a word Deputy Mayor Shepherd used quite a few times, means cutting services. This is not a question. If we have a rate freeze, then there will be services that are cut to the community. And this notion that, I understand some people are in financial hardship at the moment. That is unfortunate, but council is in financial hardship as well. And it's our responsibility. We are elected and exist, and rates are paid to council so that we bring forward services on behalf of everyone. It is not that we are swimming in money, even though people think 400 and whatever it is, 50 million. Geez, I'd love that in my back pocket. What could I do with that? Well, take it out of the context of me as an individual and put it into the context of council providing services to the whole community. And as was said before, this is council actually being wise in putting money aside for the projects that are going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of our water, our sewer going forward. We are, in fact, people should be, provided council is wise with its use of money, and I believe that it is in large extent, like everyone, we should be very pleased that council is actually putting money aside for the future so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we can't provide the services that people want. It is, in fact, irresponsible. I believe Councillor Griffiths used the right words there, and not in the best interests of the community, for us to make a rate freeze now when we sacrificed the whole rate peg last year. Now we have 4.7%. It's still not keeping up with our expenses. If anybody feels that this is not true, then please contact councillors, and we would be more than happy to give you the figures in terms of the increase in wages, particularly. Power is going up. Talk about the cost of materials and construction. It is just off the charts at the moment, and things are very difficult for council. And if anyone thinks that it's that residents alone or businesses alone are suffering, then they're not in the picture of reality today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inchman. Any other discussion, councillors? I'll speak against this. I've never voted for a rate rise, ever, in 6 years. I've never, ever said I will support an increase on our community until this organisation gets its own backyard into order, and it has been working really hard to do that. I've heard words like sacrifice, hardship, things are difficult, suffering. I tell you what, suffering, hardship, things are difficult it means people living in tents, it means people working, people living in cars, it means people can't afford homes in this region. It means that major supermarkets are reporting theft, enormous theft at the moment. Our major supermarkets in Port Macquarie are registering enormous theft of grocery items, so people can now start to feed themselves. So I'm sure our community understands what hardship, sacrifice, difficulty, suffering actually looks like in this region. And I think when this council and a portion of the elected body raise our rates, I'm sure that people won't be suggesting that, oh, well, it's only by $60, or what they will get is a clear message that this community has raised rates in one of the hardest economic times that this region and some of our generation is going to see. Mark my words. I'm not supporting this, and can I also say that we froze rates in the last 12 months, and I'm pleased to say we have been delivering the most infrastructure that this council has in years, and our gardens are looking fantastic. It's all about management. It is about fiscal management, and it's about do we need the really fluffy stuff, or do we go back to core services? And that's what we went back to. We went back to core services of business, and that's what you're seeing now being delivered in the region. So, you know, I think the argument's mute myself, but the community will soon see enough exactly where their council does or does not support them. Thank you. Right of reply? Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak in support of this and thank Councillor Shepherd for a very sensible, level-headed amendment. I'm not sure what person in a tent is going to be paying rates to council anyway, but I would say that our responsibility is not just for the infrastructure that we're going to deliver this year. Our responsibility is for thinking forward into the future and what we need down the track for our community. And $2.6 million in this year means a heck of a lot more down the line, right? Everybody understands the compounding effect of missing that money now. How much more crippling that is even further down the track. Think 10 years ahead. So I support this motion, and so should everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to speak against. It's been pointed out, people in the community are hurting, businesses hurting. Talking to business owners in Wauchope just before coming to this meeting, they're the quietest they've ever been. We have layoffs from business are now imminent, and this has been seen by the unemployment going from 3.5 to 3.7. So when you're talking about tents, that's going to result in tents, not being able to afford the basics. Talking to financial experts only yesterday before they hold their conference tomorrow, the consensus is there's 2 rate rises still to come. Things are going to get worse, and we need to play our part in helping the community. Everyone is having to tighten the belt, and we should be no different.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Griffiths.
Just going to add to that again, that I still believe that, you know, as future sustainability of council, we actually really can't afford to be creating a rate freeze. We know there's housing shortages in the community. We know that's part of the major issue that we've got, and it's something that really needs to be resolved by state government. We've got issues with sewer as well, which means that we've got a lot of work to do and money to spend to actually bring that up to standard. Again, it's significant money that needs to be spent in that area. One of the other issues that I did notice also is, again, businesses have been closing, but it's not because of the people coming to them. It's because they haven't been able to get employees to actually operate their business. So they've not been able to function. It is, again, another issue that's happening within the community, which is not necessarily a function of council or a responsibility of council. It's just an indirect current employment / economic situation that, council actually can't control. So again, I just believe that, if we were looking at, again, the rate rise, I checked my rate notice. It was $26.70 on my rate notice on the base rate. That's what it increased over the 3 years. The other value is based on property value increases. Again, that is based on something that we can't control. That is something which occurs, as part of people buying properties. So if people want to go and spend a lot more money than they normally would to compete over properties, that again is something that is triggered as part of a market factor. So, again, how does that affect what we do? We only actually, again, as part of what I consulted with the director, was again the amount of money that council received is actually capped at a certain value anyway. So we can only grow at a certain rate. So again, the council has limited opportunities to actually increase its actual rate base. So again, it's just more consideration for our strategic financial sustainability moving forward and being able to deliver into the future. But again, the feedback that I got last year again was the same thing, is that people would rather take a small incremental increase than find down the track we've got to this position, which is what it was about 6 years ago. We've got a 52.4% backlog at that point in time that was known that we actually couldn't deliver under the current financial position. So at this point in time, I believe council has actually made a lot of strides forward to improve where we are. But again, I don't know that we can continue to actually, not receive some rateable increase, whatever that rate peg is, and it's called indexation, not an actual council increase, it's indexation. But again, all those costs have increased by 15%, and again, how do we continue to actually deliver if we're earning 5% on interest now, only currently, where those rates have actually been the same as everybody knows, 0.5, 1% at the most. So we haven't actually been getting return on interest either. So that's only the current position. But again, our costs have actually increased to greater than 15%. So we're not keeping up. So it's just something we need to consider.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Right of reply, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to pick up on three particular points that have occurred throughout this debate. One is equity, the other is economic recovery or local economy health, and the last one is around our financial sustainability moving forward. Last year, when I advocated against a rate freeze, I took up the issue of equity very strongly because, in fact, it's not people in tents who are paying the rates and therefore receiving a benefit from a rate freeze. And in fact, the people who are receiving the average benefit of $60, they might be pleased, but the greatest benefit, of course, will go to those who own large amounts of property, and it's their entitlement to make money from that, but they're not entitled for us to help them save money through reducing rates. In regards to the proposition that this average $60 a year would aid the economic recovery significantly or aid our local economy significantly, I would suggest that if that is a key interest of this council, we would be prudent to reconsider the decision that we made, which I did not support, but the decision that we made to shelve an economic development strategy that was developed over several years of staff consultation, paid consultancy and community collaboration. I hope that into the future, when we need to reconsider that as one of our lead strategies that we currently don't have in place, that we will give that due consideration. The final point that I would like to make is in regards to our financial sustainability. There's a very popular narrative around councils needing to tighten their belt, and usually there's kernels of truth in these sorts of things. We have had the great benefit of having a CEO come in who's certainly significantly awarded coming to us and has helped set us on a plan of belt tightening for this business of council so that it can continue to serve our community. And not only is it belt tightening, I would say it's a strict program of belt tightening through the General Fund Improvement Plan, which is available for all councillors. Certainly we've resolved updates on it several times to know the dozens of programs that are occurring as a part of this improvement program and the dozens of actions. And the advice that I've received is that how we would improve the delivery of that General Fund Improvement Plan and therefore our financial sustainability would actually be to properly resource it. The only reason it's not going faster, to more fully resource it, the only reason that financial sustainability program isn't going faster is because it doesn't have the full resourcing that would be required. And that's appropriate, because we're trying to balance for delivering for our community right now. And so we can't do everything to make everything better for the future right now. We have to balance that at the same time. I think that we're on a good course, on a prudent course with our general fund improvement plan. And I think that if we are able to communicate accurate facts to our community about the benefits and costs of a rate freeze, that they're going to be willing to come along this process with us.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Interman, Councillor Lipovac, Edwards, Griffiths and Shepherd. Those against? Councillor Slade, Councillor Maltman, Councillor Roberts and myself. So the motion has been carried. Thank you, Councillor. So we'll move...
Madam Mayor, may I move a 10-minute adjournment?
We have had people waiting, I think, for the next... Do we have people in the gallery waiting for this next item? We happy to have an adjournment?
And Lake Caddo too after it. 5 minutes?
Just, yep, okay, yep. You move, seconded. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. All those in favour? Hello, councillors. All those in favour? No? Okay, all right. Councillor Interman, Lipovac, Edwards, Griffiths, Shepherd, Slade, myself. Those against? Councillor Maltman, Councillor Roberts. Okay then, 10 minutes. And if we could be back. Okay. Good. Okay. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you. That quick just refresh that we've all had. And you'll see on the recording, and we welcome you back even though you're not here with us specifically today. So we'll move on to item number 13.01, Notice of Motion, New South Wales Forestry Corporation and National Parks and Wildlife cease logging, and we have a motion from you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. 1301, I brought this notice of motion, which is called New South Wales Forestry Corporation and National Parks and Wildlife cease logging. Recommendation is that Council advocate to the New South Wales Forestry Corporation and National Parks and Wildlife Service to permanently cease all logging in compartments 41 and 43 of the Bulga State Forest within the upper catchment of the Hastings River, and add the compartments to the Birrawal, Bulga National Park. And 2, advocate to the New South Wales Government to develop a plan for the just transition of the Forestry Corporation New South Wales native forest sector to ecologically sustainable hardwood plantations and farm forestry, and that such plans ensure the protection of existing jobs in the sector and ensure a reliable supply of high-value timber, native hardwood timber product into the future by writing to the relevant state members: 1, the member for Mile Lakes; 2, the member for Port Macquarie; 3, the member for Oxley, and writing to the ministers and shadow ministers: 1, the Minister for Energy; 2, the Minister for Finance and Employee Relations; 3, the Minister for Agriculture; 4, the Minister for Environment and Heritage; and 5, the Minister for Natural Resources. And 3, note the resolution of item 10.1 at the 8th of February 2023 Mid-Coast Council Ordinary Council meeting, as the minutes of that meeting are recorded and provided in the attachments.
Thank you. Seconder? Seconder, Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Griffiths to second, thank you. You wish to speak to this?
Okay, thank you. I have some talk notes here, so I'm going to read from them to give you some good background and understanding. These are thorough notes. The Mid-Coast Council area, a traditionally conservative area, is represented by a group of individual councillors from across the political spectrum, and they unanimously supported this very motion in February of this year. We have the opportunity to come together and to do the same. Let's show them our support and add to the call to do the type of forest management and plantation harvesting that is better for biodiversity, waterways and employment all at the same time. native forest logging is different to plantation timber production. And it's important to understand that native forests are made up of mixed species, plants and animals, of whole biodiverse ecosystems. It is ecosystems that sustains all life on this planet, human and non-human alike. Water is essential to our survival, and whole, intact stands of biodiverse forest, especially up in the mountains, actually attract and capture more water from the atmosphere and perform the function of purifying our water supply. They act as a great big filtration system, and it's just one of the many important ecosystem services that forests do for us. So let's understand that what happens up in the mountain from us greatly affects us here. We have been through long, severe drought and water restrictions, and we're working to try and secure more water storage for the future of the Hastings community. But what good is higher dam wall if we're going to cut down the forests and biodiversity in the mountains that then limits our chances of receiving enough rains and enough water to store? Councillors all received a report forwarded by a community member called the Tree Project. It was dated February this year, and the report confirms that native forest logging cost the New South Wales taxpayer $9 million in 2022. I repeat, we the taxpayer in New South Wales propped up the native forest logging operations to the tune of $9 million in 1 year alone because it simply isn't even profitable. We know, and we now have the science, the economic and social evidence to prove that native forest logging is an unsustainable, profitless and destructive industry, and workers and communities that are involved in native forest logging need a plan that provides a secure and viable pathway away from native forest logging. Clause 2 in the motion to advocate for a just transition for forest workers in this declining native forest logging industry. I'll describe that. A just transition will ensure a job-for-job guarantee and the expansion of both hard and softwood plantation forest estate by some 33,000 hectares. Madam Mayor, can I finish my... Thank you. They'll increase revenue and create many more jobs and secure the growth of what could be a truly renewable and sustainable timber industry into the future. Added to this, more jobs and workers are also needed to actively manage the native forests. So native forests and national parks still need to be managed, of course, and that's more employment opportunities. Because when they're managed, they are ensured that they're clear of invasive species and that they are more resistant to fire. Bulga Forest adjoins the Port Macquarie Hastings local government area and the Mid Coast Council LGA to our south. And you might know this if you've been up to Ellenborough Falls, but when you look at the Port Macquarie Hastings Biodiversity Strategy, page 59, our regional habitat corridors are mapped, and the unique shape of our LGA border allows one to easily see that our wildlife, including the now endangered koala, desperately needs this refugia. I don't know about you, but I care about the koala, whether it's sitting on this side of that line on the paper or the other side. And I think that most of our community do too. I might have to save the rest for my reply.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
I'm just going to speak against this motion. I've been watching and probably participating in the timber industry for 30 years, so over time I have seen the change in the industry. What happened essentially was that a lot of the small operators were moved or pushed out of the industry. We started with something like 52 timber mills and we're down to a very minor number. Essentially what happened, it was to do with compartments and issuing of availability of timber supply. So what happened was a lot of the small operators were paid out, but as far as retraining or being able to access new employment, etc., a lot of those people actually were illiterate. They actually couldn't read, couldn't write. They had a minimal skill enough to get through life, but essentially they weren't essentially retrainable. They were people who relied on that work. They relied on, you know, from year to year being able to actually stay in that job and that position. So I've seen that over time. So essentially to say that, you know, we want to actually restrict or reduce the amount of available area for an industry, if there's already an issue that actually suggests that, you know, it's not sustainable, then essentially we have to look at what is that. And again, that's for the state government to look at because it's not a council issue. The state government needs to get in and have a look at their scientific data or their practices and how they manage and whether, again, they need larger area to sustain that. Essentially as well, I would have said too that timber is a sustainable product. It is something that actually we do know grows and is going to replace itself. So essentially, again, if we go back to the original point, which is how much area is needed to actually facilitate the continuous supply of a particular material that we know can renew itself time after time after time. And we actually also live in a high growth area, again, which is ideal for timber industry. So, you know, I would hate to see that again, more impact on employment within our local area, more impact on supply, again, when we know that supply issues are quite significant. So, yeah, sorry, Councillor Edwards.
Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you. So I have a keen interest in some of the points that Councillor Griffiths has raised also in terms of the lost jobs. So I lived out at Papenborough and the Beechwood Mill was closed. And I had friends whose families were affected by that and certainly were affected by the lack of capacity to move on to another job. But in fact, that's one of the things I very much like about this specific motion. So in terms of Clause 2, we do know based on the data that specifically the New South Wales Forestry Corporation industry and the logging of the existing old growth native forests is not financially sustainable. And it's not even providing us that much hardwood. For those of us who were there on Monday night, you know, we heard that only 6% of the timber harvested from those forests actually gets used for hardwood and building and whatnot. So, sorry, go back to my original point about the employment. Because this industry is already in decline and we actually have an alternative industry which is showing itself to be quite financially viable, what we're going to see is a natural decline and a natural rise of this other industry, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the people in this industry getting jobs in the new industry. So for me, the key part here is that job for job commitment for a just transition, so we don't get a bunch of people who don't necessarily have job skills for a range of different areas, and many of them in fact do, but they have that assurance that they are going to get a job in an industry that's going to be moving forward. As it stands in the current industry, their employment is not secure, it's not stable, and that certainly causes a lot of stress. So that particular Clause 2 I'm very comfortable with. What I like about Clause 1 is that it's very focused. It's actually not talking about ceasing logging everywhere. It's talking about ceasing logging in two specific compartments that I now understand to have significant ecological value because they're much older than most of the forest that we have available. And I've grappled a little bit with the fact that it is outside our LGA because I think that is a significant matter. But I went back to some of the comments made by councillors from Mid Coast Council, which traditionally is an extremely conservative council. And one of the key comments they made, and there was a unanimous decision by that council. You know, traditionally conservative have people from across the whole spectrum, and one of the comments from a conservative councillor there was about understanding that these trees were performing a significant service in terms of the quality of their water catchment and the quality of water in their water catchment. And so I think if we have the opportunity, noting that our water catchment is also affected by those compartments, I think that we have an opportunity here to, with not too significant work, to be able to help advocate to the state for a good outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just speak against this one, unsurprisingly. So on this one in particular, we're talking about a matter and an area outside of our LGA. I've been able to ascertain that, and that's a very, very big point. But we're also talking about advocacy, so that council advocate. So that's going to take some resources. We're talking about spending money on issues outside of our LGA. That's a pretty interesting point on its own. We'll probably talk about that for about half an hour. But the other thing is talking about job for job swap. When I see the word job, for me, that represents somebody, a person, their family, their income. So when we're talking about swapping job for job, we're actually talking about deleting someone's job, deleting their income. That's incredibly insensitive. And we're also talking about potentially stopping an industry at a time when economic circumstances are incredibly tough. We've just covered that in the first part of the meeting. I don't like anything about this particular motion. I ask councillors really consider what they're doing here.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Inton.
Thank you.
I support the motion. There are so many things that are wrong with the Forestry Corporation and how it is managing or mismanaging our forests. So many things that are going wrong with that industry that are being hidden, except for those people who raise their voices and express a concern. I had the opportunity about 20 years ago to examine our historic logging in this area, and we had at that stage, or earlier than that, up to that stage, the highest diversity of tree species being harvested in the whole of New South Wales. Now that we've gone to the Forestry Corporation, it's become industrialised forestry. It's a bit like medicine has become industrialised, many things have become industrialised, and forestry is one, having become industrialised and having lost touch with the asset seems a bit callous, but nevertheless the asset with which they're dealing, it's no longer considered as something that needs to be sustainable. It's no longer considered something that is of intrinsic value, and the evidence of that is twofold, I believe. Number one, that there is $9 million in subsidies going to Forestry Corporation in New South Wales alone. So it's not a case of it being a viable industry. It is on its last legs and needs to end, not in the sense of stopping logging, but in the sense, as was mentioned before, of stopping wide-scale logging. We need to, I believe, have a balance between plantation forestry and timber and selective logging of some areas of native forest. Back in the day that Deputy Mayor Shepherd was talking about in Papenborough, when there were so many individual foresters, it was an industry that one could put one's heart and soul into and get an income without destroying the forest. Most of our forest assets now go to low-value wood chips. They even go to low-value wood cubes to be burnt. That is scandalous. It's absolutely scandalous. And I understand what's being said about this is not in our area, but it is in our water catchment area. And if it's going to, if things like this are going to change, I believe it definitely needs changing. Then we need people to actually speak out. This is Council's opportunity to speak on behalf of an asset of ours, which is a part of our water catchment, and also of our forestry assets. I commend the motion to my colleagues. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Edwards, for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Intamin. Any other discussion, councillors? Of course, I'm going to wade into this one. I have started to educate myself into forestry, the timber industry, logging, private native forestry, because I may be required to be a bit more involved in that on the other side. But what I want to be clear about is my full support for the industry and my full support for the practices that the industry undertakes. My understanding through the education I've had is that this industry is one of the most heavily regulated industries there are. And we can get emotional and we can talk about koalas when we talk about trees, but when we lock up our forests and we don't manage them and we don't maintain them and we don't look after the biodiversity in there, we get wildfires. And wildfires, when they sweep through, are catastrophic. The irony of where we are today should not be lost on anyone here. We are in Wauchope, the timber town. This township was built off the back of the timber industry, and at different stages in history, more timber was transported out of this town than any other town in Australia, and it was the railway line that transported that timber. And that timber has built hundreds of thousands of homes, that have housed hundreds of thousands of families and provided an income for hundreds of thousands of people over time. In fact, timber from Wauchope was used in the construction of the Opera House, and that timber probably stands the test of time, with carbon locked into it, might I add. So here we are today with a motion which, in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, we're beginning to see some infiltration of greenwashing into this council. Our ratepayers expect this council to focus on core services. We had a debate about that before. Our ratepayers expect us to focus on upgrades of infrastructure. We had a debate about that before, and financial responsibility that gives a better return to the ratepayer. This is not about cheering from the sidelines for another council that's having a problem that they consider viable in their area. This is the Port Macquarie Hastings region, and the Bulga Forest does not sit in our region. How arrogant we are to think that for a minute as a council it is our business.
Point of order, Madam Mayor, under clause 15.
My opinion, Councillor Shepherd, and if you would, I have not interrupted you. I am not breaching any points of order here. This is my opinion, and for you to stand up and interrupt me when I am addressing my community, I find it insulting.
Madam
Your
Mayor,
point of
under
order
the
is
Code
out
of
of
Conduct,
order.
councillors have a right and, in fact, a responsibility to draw to attention when they believe that a clause of the Code of Conduct is being contravened. And so I'm enacting my right and responsibility, which I believe starts with citing the clause that I'm referring to.
Cite the clause.
Under clause 1511D of Council's Code of Meeting Practice, a councillor commits an act of disorder if the councillor insults or makes unfavourable personal remarks about or imputes improper motives to any other council official. In regard to the comments you've just made, I believe that they do make insult or unfavourable personal remarks about councillors who disagree with the opposition here in the room.
Councillor Shepherd, we go through this quite a bit, you and I, but I'm going to rule against, as I do, because for the reasons being that I have not singled out any particular councillor. I have provided an opinion. I'm using my time to speak to this motion, of which I am also entitled to as a councillor. Now, I would really ask for your respect to allow me to finish my opinion, to address my community on something that is a very important issue to both sides of the argument, for and against.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move a motion of dissent in regards to what appears to be your ruling to not uphold the point of order. Specifically in regards to the unfavourable comments being made by other councillors.
We have, Councillor Shepherd has moved a motion of dissent. We need a seconder. Councillor Edwards to second. Thank you. Do we need to discuss this any further?
All I would be asking as a result of this motion of dissent is that, respectfully, you continue to convey your views, however, without making insulting remarks or conveying unfavourable personal opinions or imputing improper motives of other councillors as required under the code under 15.11D.
Thank you. And Councillor Shepherd, as I said before, I refute that is what you are suggesting, and we will replay this. Replay this recording so we can be clear on that. There is no mention of any councillors, and in my address to the community, I'm simply discussing what is going on right here in this debate, and this is my opinion on this debate. But we've had this discussion. I'm going to put your motion of dissent as seconded by Councillor Edwards to a vote. All those in favour? Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Edwards. Those against? Councillor Interman, Councillor Lipovac, Councillor Slade, Councillor Mortman, Councillor Roberts and myself. Thank you, councillors. Council, I'm asking that we really seriously consider the consequences of diving deeply into issues that are not ours. Thank goodness this is a state government issue. Thank goodness this is made
Madam Mayor, I believe that your time is up.
Well, my time was actually interrupted, if I
Your
might say.
time was up before Councillor Shepherd took her seat.
Councillor Interman, can I just say that respectfully, I have allowed councillors today leave to continue. I would think the same respect would be offered
Madam
to me,
Mayor,
but
it just
obviously
sounds
not.
like you're heading off on a whole new...
Obviously
whole
not.
new-
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you.
Interman.
Thank
Sit
you.
down. Thank you. Thank you. The end. Obviously, I've made my point. The end. Unbelievable, councillors. Absolutely unbelievable.
And again, Madam Mayor, that's casting aspersions.
Councillor Interman, my time was cut short. It has been interrupted by procedure, and I haven't had my chance to speak to this community. And again, I will need to speak to them in the open forum as opposed to in the council forum. Any other... Sorry, I'm sorry. I know you want to be involved, but it's a council meeting. It's a council meeting. I will not ask you again. Order. Order. Thank you. Okay, so is there any other discussion on this, councillors?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, could I just clarify something?
Absolutely.
You mentioned before about you hoped that we weren't overtaken by greenwashing. Greenwashing is in fact a pretense by a polluting or environmentally damaging business to pretend and put a label of green environmental sustainability over the top of their name. We are not greenwashing here.
Thank you. You're a summation of what I was meaning by that. But this isn't a debate. The conversation has been had, Councillor Interman. I will move on to other councillors that may wish to wade into it. Councillors?
All good.
Okay. Right of reply, Councillor Edwards.
Okay, thanks very much. My right of reply, I'll quickly touch on a couple of things that were mentioned. First of all, the suggestion that that we wouldn't use council resources, in any way to simply write some letters to some members and ministers. I mean, we haven't done that before, or, I'm pretty sure a number of councillors have supported motions to write and, in fact, do something very similar. Point 1 of this motion asks to cease logging only in compartments 41 and 43 of the Bulga Forest. That's because most of that forest burnt in the fires, and the only little bit that's left, which has koalas and other wildlife in it, is now proposed to be logged. Logging was started. It's been ceased by the community, but it's intended to be logged. So this is not about ceasing logging immediately across New South Wales. What it is, in point 2, is about a just transition. So if you don't support a just transition for the logging industry and to ensure they have a sustainable industry into the future, and in fact an industry that we can grow and we can have even, greater financial benefit here in the Hastings and export to the world. Another point I'd like to make is that, yes, this area of Australia, in New South Wales in particular, has had some of the biggest loss of biodiversity, and it's one of the most biodiverse regions. So the idea as well that, all of the wood that's been taken out is building homes is not the case. That is softwood plantations. We've had this conversation before, but obviously it hasn't cut through. I'd like to finish the rest of my talk. I said that I don't really, care more for a koala that's on my side of the line or into our neighbouring LGA, and I think most of our community would feel that way. How do I know this? Well, apart from having community approach me, email me, call me, I can see in our community strategic plan, Imagine 2050, that our community wants to be the most livable, sustainable and innovative place in Australia. The Community Strategic Plan is one of the most important planning documents for the Port Macquarie-Hastings region, and it sets the direction for how we, our community, council and other levels of government may work together to make the vision a reality. The CSP recognises and aims after the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals too. Goal 15 is titled Life on the Land, and it states that forests have a significant role in reducing the risk of natural disasters, including floods, droughts, landslides and other extreme events. At a global level, forests mitigate climate change through carbon sequestration. They contribute to the balance of oxygen, carbon dioxide and humidity in the air, and they protect watersheds. That's what we're talking about here, Hastings Watershed, which supplies 75% watersheds do of the world's fresh water. Goal 15 aims to protect, restore, promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification and halt and reverse land degradation and biodiversity loss. When I look at all of the individual town and village community plans throughout our LGA, the sentiment of those goals is echoed loud and clear. Wauchope and surrounds wants to respect and protect our precious natural resources and the natural environment. Madam Mayor, can I table my notes?
You cannot. The same was not afforded to me.
May I table my notes simply for the community?
Your notes. Thank you.
I can?
You. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Table your notes. You're done.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we've had the right of reply. Thank you for tabling with Michael. And we'll put the motion to the vote then. Just when Councillor Edwards returns. Thank you. So put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Interman, Councillor Lipperback, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Shepherd. Those against? Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Slade, Councillor Maltman, Councillor Roberts and myself. Thank you. The motion's been defeated. We'll move now on to item number 13.02, Lake Cat-Eye Natural Resource Management Monthly Update Report. Someone to move, thank you. Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Maltman. Any discussion on this, councillors?
Sorry, is there a question? No. So I just wanted to bring this out of the block again this month, again because we're seeing a really high rate of progress happening, and like last month, you know, we're seeing a lot of these areas of action that are coming to fruition right now or in the coming months, and so I think it's really important we keep drawing that to the attention of the Lake Cat-Eye community so they can know.
Sorry, Councillor. Sorry,
Yes?
Are you moving an amendment or something? What's happening
you
here?
asked if anyone wanted to speak to the item, and I was doing that.
Oh, sorry. When you popped up, I just looked straight at you, and I didn't look at who'd moved in second. So, was there any discussion? Sorry, Councillor Shepherd. I just wanted to be sure that there was no discussion. Okay, sorry. I just looked straight at you when you popped up. Continue on. My apologies.
Thank you. So, yes, in short, bringing this attention to the Lake Cat-Eye community, noting that a number of actions are coming to fruition right now. The other point I want to make is that at the last report, I certainly had a sense, and I think there was within some of the community as well, of losing sight of the broader picture of the coastal management program. And so I'm very pleased to see in this, and grateful to see in this report, that we do actually have some progress on the whole seats, some progress listed, advised to us of the whole coastal management program, which goes beyond Lake Cat-Eye, but of course the Lake Cat-Eye forming a huge part of that. So I look forward in the coming months to see these items coming to fruition, and then what that enables us to do with that coastal management program into the future.
Thank you.
I did want to speak, so I thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Council for this monthly report. It's quite comprehensive. And I also would like to thank Greg, that's been here from Revive Lake Cat-Eye all day for this item, so I appreciate your attendance today, Greg. And I thank you for all the continued great work you're doing in Lake Cat-Eye. There's been a number of motions we've actually put through. In fact, Lake Cat-Eye's been told by Councillor here today that it's been getting epic representation. So it's great to see that we're getting a lot of traction in Lake Cat-Eye, and we're finally starting to see a lot of the on-ground action, which I really appreciate, and I know the community does, because it's a long time coming. I still want to see an escalation of delivery on Lake Cat-Eye and an escalation of the CMP. In fact, at the recent Meet the Candidates at Lake Cat-Eye, it was one of the questions that I brought up, if the candidates were going to assist in escalating CMP delivery, because at the moment we've still got a delivery time way into the future. I think it's 2024 for the Lake Cat-Eye plan, but what it actually says is plus. When that plus is actually weighs on my mind as to what that plus actually means at times. So I thank you for all the great work you're doing, and I'd really like to see an escalation of the CMP somehow. And I know that we've made, myself and have made into the operational plan, something that will try and help escalate that CMP plan. I'd like to see that come through. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Any other discussion, councillors? No? Okay, I'll put the motion and vote then. All those in favour? See none against, I'll declare that carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 1304. Planning Proposal Assessment Report. As up there, I won't read it all out. Someone to move and someone to second. Moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Griffiths. Any discussion on this, councillors?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to make comment on this one. That's why I brought it out of the block. What I'd like to say is that upon looking at this closely and noting that the details in the report here talk about 60 koala food trees, I made some inquiries and this area is actually in identified habitat corridor. However, I just want to say this is kind of a good news story because there's a couple of things. The fact that we were actually addressed on Monday, some of the councillors might not know this, but Mr. Tony Thorne made an address to councillors on Monday and let us know that, in actual fact, the Catholic Church is going to modify that development application to actually retain many, many more of the trees, and only 20 trees would need to be removed with the new design. And I think that's a great thing. In actual fact, as well, part of the back of the property, which is going to be retained, is going to link to the habitat corridor. And I think that our community really loves it when that sort of thing can happen. And I just want to say, moving forward, this is what I think our community is looking forward to, is understanding and knowing where our corridors for wildlife are, seeing those protected, and then knowing where we can develop in and around. So I just wanted to pull it out of the block to say this is a good news story because they're doing what they can to minimise the impact. They're definitely going to convert and protect some of that land with the rezoning. And so, this is a great news story for adding to that habitat and corridor that then is protected into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Griffiths, anyone else wish to speak to this? Okay, I'll put the motion to vote then. All those in favour? See none again? No, sorry, I didn't see your hand. None against, declare it carried. Thank you. All right, item number 13.05. It's another planning proposal assessment report.
I have an amendment.
Councillor Intiman.
Bearing in mind the owner has withdrawn after discussion, and so the words are up there. I'll read it nevertheless, if that's acceptable. So that Council 1, note that the landowner has now withdrawn the planning proposal request to amend the Port Macquarie Hastings LEP 2011 to rezone lot 180, I'll just read out the lot numbers, lot 37 and lots 1, 2, 7 and 8. Highfield Circuit, 3 and 5 Collide Place and 9 and 11 Kingfisher Road from R1 General Residential and R2 Low Density Residential to B for Mixed Use and increase the height of buildings and floor space ratio provisions. 2. Acknowledge that, so that's acknowledging that they've withdrawn that. Acknowledge that the subject land is identified as part of the wider health and education precinct within the North Coast Regional Plan 2041 and the Port Macquarie Hastings Urban Growth Management Strategy 2017 to 36, and invite the proponent owners to submit a new planning proposal application which addresses the matters raised in the report, that's in the agenda, at a time when the sewer servicing issues have been resolved, we'll come back to that word, for the area, and details of the Oxley Highway, John Oxley Drive, Wrights Road intersections upgrades have been determined by Transport for New South Wales.
Thank you. Councillor Griffiths. Seconded.
Sorry?
Do you want to speak?
Right. So I understand that the applicant and new landowner has withdrawn their planning proposal, and I'm sure Director Watkins will correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. There were some concerns about it being in advance of the infrastructure, and so after discussion they have agreed to withdraw it, and they can bring it back, a new planning proposal back at a time that I'll talk to in a second, but realising they can work on their planning proposal at any time. They can start on their planning proposal now, so it's not like as if council is holding them up. But the timeline on it is when the matters raised in this report have been, which is the sewer servicing issues, have been resolved. Previous to this, it was that they had been actually solved and the infrastructure in place. It's now that the problem is resolved. They can go ahead, and when we've got the details of that highway upgrade by Transport for New South Wales. So I commend this to my colleagues, and it's not that there's a problem with the application in principle, but it's just not at the right time, and certainly needs more detail addressed and more information from the proponent before council can properly assess it. Thank you. And Director Watkins, please, if I've said something wrong, please let everybody know. All good? Thank you.
Any other discussion? I just want to make one small point. I'm in support of it, but I think it's really important to know that it's not just council and council's infrastructure that gets in the way sometimes, or lack of it. I need our community to know very clearly that the staff couldn't recommend progress of this planning proposal because Transport for New South Wales, they need to provide details about the Oxley Highway and Wrights Road roundabout upgrade. And that is a real problem for the community, and it's become a real problem for this development. I know there's some other issues there, but we need to push hard down on state government about improving this. So whoever is in government after the election, councillors, I really suggest that we work really hard in this space with Wrights Road roundabout. Because it's affecting our development, it's affecting our hospital, it's affecting our commuters, and you know, and the economic movement around the LGA for us. So apart from that, I support it. Any other discussion, councillors? No. All right. I'll put the motion to the vote. Then all those in favour. See none against. I'll declare that carried. Thank you. We'll move on to. Item 13.06, another DA for alterations and additions, as it's seen there. Someone to move?
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, I saw that we have to actually deal with this because it's come from DAP, and so I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Someone to second? Seconded by Councillor Griffiths. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to this?
This concerns a residential dwelling in chained alterations to an existing residential development in Bonny Hills. It's come to council because it's outside, it's more than 10% outside of our development regulations. Height is 3.5% more, and looking at the drawings, it's only over a small part of the roof that it exceeds the height by 300 mils, I think it is, and but the floor space ratio is this matter, and that's more than 10% higher than our normal density. But nevertheless, I personally believe that there should be no issue with approving it with conditions, and this was the recommendation from Development Assessment Panel. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm speaking in opposition of this, and for the reasons being that over a very long period of time, numerous residents voiced their concerns about this particular development, and I literally walked through the process and sat through the DAP meeting, and you know, there's a lot of residents who are really upset with this development. I can understand why. There's a lot of other developments that happen in our region that our residents are really upset with, and I know that you know, the face of our region is changing and it needs to, but I think we need to be more consistent, and I know that we're going through a housing strategy. I know that you know, we're going to review developmentally our local environmental plans and our development control plans, and I know in the future that, you know, in appropriate areas we need to see larger buildings and higher buildings, but for this reason, just given the absolute outcry and angst, and that it's out of, although slightly it is out of our planning, I won't be supporting this.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to confirm, I was of the understanding that there was one objection to this particular item, so I just want to confirm that in fact, perhaps through you, Madam Mayor, to the CEO, to Director Watkins, can you confirm how many objections there were to this particular DA?
Madam CEO, there was one objection related to stormwater impacts.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I would like to speak in favour of this. So noting that in fact there was only one objection. So I think you're mistaking this for another development application that was in place. So even though there was only one objection, I certainly considered this quite seriously, and specifically looking at that floor space ratio, it was 26%, and I saw that and went, whoa, bloody hell, and looked very closely at the reports. And what I discovered from looking very closely through the extensive attachments on that item was that while that is a significant deviation from our usual allowance, that pretty much on every box it's an improved outcome to what is currently there. So it is an improved outcome. So, you know, things like there's the garages were wider than what would usually be considered. However, what's proposed is still narrower than what is currently there. So I just want to convey, generally, I would certainly be wanting to listen to the subject matter experts and their specific advice on a matter that has very real legal implications for us if we were to vote against it, actually. That's a significant point. So generally I'd be likely to support the recommendation of the DAP unless I were to seek lots of legal advice. But in this case I've looked quite clearly at it, and I do think it's a superior outcome across a range of issues.
If I could just respond to that, because Councillor Shepherd, I did have a brief conversation with our director before this came up, wanting to ascertain the exact development and where it was located. And off the base, we've just brought it up on, so it actually isn't the development that had more than one complaints about it. So you've actually corrected my statement. So I'm retracting that statement absolutely. It's not the development where there were numerous complaints. So just to be clear and on record, this is not the development, so I have no cause to vote against it, and thank you. That's okay. Next time I'll double check. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Shepherd, for bringing that forward. Thank you. Any other discussion on this? No, I'll put the motion to. Sorry.
Rod Ripper.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So just to confirm for everyone and also for the information of the audience, if a matter comes before DAP and comes to us, the Development Assessment Panel, and comes to us for determination, the only safe way that we can object to that DAP determination is by refusing the development in most cases. And if we refuse the development, we have to come forward with the reasons why, at the meeting, the reasons why it's being refused, because those reasons then carry forward into any court case that might follow. Before I finish, I'm just going to ask through the CEO to Director Watkins if there's anything you would like to add to that.
Through you, Madam CEO. No, I think you've covered it, Councillor.
Thank you. So, yeah, just to make it clear, it's a tricky one, and that's why this was brought out, that we've actually got to determine it because it's been sent up by the Development Assessment Panel. Okay, cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Intiman. I'll put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? See none against. I'll declare that carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 13.07, the Integrated Transport Plan Update. Someone to move?
Yeah, happy to move.
Moved by Councillor Interman, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Any discussion?
I just want to briefly say, yeehaw, we've got this. It's been such a wait. There's been a lot of delays because of some confusion about strategic planning and particularly the blueprint. And now we've got several really significant strategic planning matters that are coming forward. The infrastructure strategy, the housing strategy, but now we've got the integrated transport plan update and really powering ahead. So I would like to thank staff for their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Interman. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've just got a couple of questions actually on this one. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director through you and Madam CEO to Director Watkins. The page 123, table 2, says walking and cycling gap analysis, assessment of how to connect land uses at a network level. Can I just check? So, are we talking about the PAMPs and the bike plan there?
Through you, Madam CEO, I think that one might be directed to Director Fish.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Director Fish.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edwards. Yeah, there would be a real connection between the PAMP and that particular item there. We are commencing the review of the pedestrian access mobility plan as well, and I guess those two tasks somewhat go hand in hand.
Okay, thank you, and apologies, Director Watkins, you get most of the questions, so I just went probably you. Supplementary question, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just to confirm, I'm sure I know the answer, but just noting that it's proposed to be undertaken in the fourth quarter. Can I just confirm that's April to June?
Yeah, that's for the commencement of that action in quarter 4.
Yep, last of the financial year.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Any other discussion on this, councillors? No further discussion. I'll put the motion to the vote. Then all those in favour? See none against. Declare it carried. Thank you. Item number 13.08, Annual Water Quality Report.
Yes, please.
Councillor Shepherd.
Just moving.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Roberts.
Yes, so I wanted to bring this out of the block. Obviously, our community are really concerned about water security into the future, and this isn't directly about water security. However, the issue of our water quality is, of course, significant when we think about water security as well. So all I'd like to do really is bring our community's attention to some of the works that are being done to improve our water quality, especially in the Port Macquarie and Camden Haven water supply, but also to be very aware of the extremely high quality of our treated reclaimed water into the future as well. So where our council isn't required to set targets for the quality across a range of measures there, but our council has, and I think that's really, really significant and really important that as we think water security into the future, that we keep in mind the various options available to us.
Thank you. Anything from you, Councillor Roberts? Any other discussion? Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? See none against. I'll declare that carried. Thank you. Move on now to item 13.09. Status of stormwater drainage system servicing Illaroo Road. I just have a few additional points to make that I'll move. That Council note the identified stormwater issues in the immediate areas surrounding Illaroo Road, Lake Cat-Eye, including but not limited to Aqua Crescent and Kawong Street. 2, note these locations have been registered on the Stormwater Risk Register for the local government area. And 3, receive a further report by September 2023 with a high-level estimated cost to address each of the identified hotspot locations and additional advice on the rating of hazards that exist at these locations. I just, through Director Fish, and I thank you for, your advice and conversation on this, is that we had a report that really identified some really troubled spots for our region down in the Lake Cat Eye area. And I just felt we just didn't go far enough in talking to our community about, well, what are we going to do with this? Like, we've got these issues, but we've got no funding for these issues. So what are we actually going to do here? So I think it's really important that moving forward, we at least indicate to our community that we will have more than just a status. We'll have a plan moving forward on how we're going to fund some of these areas into the future, and that's the sole reason for just asking for that advice and how we can step through that and have a report by later in December this year. Any other discussion, councillors?
Question?
Yes,
Please.
Councillor Inton.
Through you to the CEO and Director Fish, no doubt. I understand the importance of these, but I also understand the comment that's in the report that these actually sit within a whole table of issues. So when you come back to report to us in September, I would like to ask and hopefully have you confirm that that will be in the context of other things, other projects that we've got, so that these we understand these in context of the other work. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Madam CEO, I think in relation to point 3 there, the intent of what we would provide in reporting back would be around, firstly, the cost, some further information in terms of the risks or hazards that exist there, and also a great emphasis on the relative priorities among our stormwater issues across the network. Yeah, so you get a greater understanding and I guess can further inform your decision making.
Where they fit.
Yeah. As you see at the moment in the report, we have done that high level analysis and obviously not identified them as a shorter term priority. I'd expect that further report would continue to maintain that position, but would just provide you with some additional information should you need that.
Thank you. Amendment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry?
Amendment, please, Madam Mayor.
Yes?
So I'd like to propose an amendment which is simply points 1 and 2. So leaving out clause 3, and of course I'll speak to them.
Sorry, I really struggled to hear that last bit that you said.
I'll speak to why I would be leaving out clause 3.
Okay. All right. So we have an amendment. A seconder? Seconded by Councillor Edwards, yes?
Yes. So I think first off the bat, if a community member, especially someone in one of these affected areas, sees that I've suggested that we get rid of clause 3, they'd be pretty upset, and so I'm already feeling like I need to explain myself, and I will, and I'm hoping that putting facts on the table helps suggest that my clauses 1 and 2 and leaving 3 out is defensible. So what we already have is a risk management register for all of these different priorities that these particular hotspots sit within, and that register is prioritised on predefined criteria. That includes first of all risk of life, habitable floor, inundation, depth and velocity hazards, the severity of the properties impacted, and potential damage to private and public property. So that register that we've already got going and has been used to prioritise the relevant projects, that's our process for doing that. So there are existing stormwater hotspot locations on the register that is already defined that are rated as high priorities due to the nature, the risk to assets, and life, the risk to life as well, and the frequency of the inundation that occurs. And so examples of these are the Wauchope CBD, for instance, the flash flooding that occurred in the 2022 event. Out in West Haven, there's Black Swan Terrace, where numerous residential properties have known floor inundation that arrives from large overland flows from North Brother Mountain. There's St Joseph's School and Ocean Drive, Laurelton. So none of these are in Port as well, notably. Large overland flows from North Brother, inundating school property, car parking and buildings. So the Ilaroos Lake Road Stormwater Upgrade project is listed on the Stormwater Risk Register, but is ranked lower than many of the other locations due to a lower inundation risk or risk to private and public property and risk to life. So my personal opinion is that if we have a register that defines already where these hotspots fit risk-wise and priority-wise for our whole community, that rather than picking out those particular ones and saying, let's get a report, which will create the expectation that we're going to act on it, and I think that's creating an unrealistic expectation for that community. I think what we should be doing is letting staff get on with their business as usual, which is methodically working through that list, methodically working through that existing priority list based on risk to life first of all, as well as all those other priorities. So I did include the clause 2 from the Mayor's amendment because I think it's important that people know there is a risk register, and I hope that in our conversations with the community about why we haven't said we've identified these risks, let's just fix them. We're actually saying we've identified these risks and we need to look at how they fit within the priorities based on a predefined criteria. It's not a sexy argument, but I think it's the right one.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'm going to speak against this, not because it was a motion that I added anything to, that this report is actually about Lake Cat-Eye and the surrounds of Illaroo Road and those areas. So it's a specific report for this specific place. So it wasn't technically about, you know, I guess Laurelton and Wauchope, and it was in relation to this. And the reason I asked for this is because basically when I read through this report, it identified them and said, basically at present the identified hotspots and works within the Lake Cat-Eye investigation area are not assessed as a short-term priority for action and therefore anticipated to remain unfunded in the medium to long term. So what that is actually telling our community is that, you know, we have no plan. We have no, we're not triaging anything. Yes, we've got a stormwater risk register for the local government area, but this was actually site specific. And I don't know, if I'm suffering from inundation, whether it be to my driveway, my home, my yard or whatever, consistently through old you know, infrastructure that's not coping, I kind of want my council to, you know, have a plan on how they're going to kind of rectify that. And I guess all I was asking, through the advice of the director, was that we receive a further report in September at a high level, basically in a triage form about, well, how are we going to address that? Because that's not good enough to me for the community, that it's unfunded and it will remain unfunded in the medium to long term. So, you know, hence the reason why point 3 is in there. So we do have a plan moving forward of action. It's a report. Anyway, for that reason,
Thank you. A question, Madam Mayor. Would you be more inclined to support this amendment or potentially take it in if there were a request for us to receive a briefing or report as to the status of the stormwater risk register more broadly?
I'm not being difficult. I just want some communication via a report back in relation to this specific issue here. So it's site specific. That's kind of what I'm looking for, is a little bit of dialogue back to our community in a way that, yeah, of course, some people may not be happy with it, but that sort of steps it out. I really enjoyed reading the Tuffens Lane, you know, how that was stepped out, that report. That made sense to me, although I didn't like the time frame and I didn't like the cost that it was going to take. It made a lot of sense to me that I thought would make a lot of sense to stakeholders and the broader community. And I kind of drew my inspiration from that as well, where I thought, you know, from a triage point of view. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I would really like to see 3 stay in, so I won't be supporting your amendment. Councillor Intiman.
Question through the CEO to Director Fish. Is the stormwater risk register available to the public?
Through you, Madam CEO, no, I don't believe it is a register that's available to the public. Our staff obviously manage that and add sites as they come in via customer requests or identified through our own work and add those into the register and do an assessment, obviously against the criteria similar to what the Deputy Mayor has outlined.
Thank you. And question to Director Watkins: Would these matters at Lake Cadide, would they be likely to come in under catchment management program?
Through you, Madam CEO, probably not all of them, no. There may be one or two, but for
Right.
a large part they're stormwater.
Right. So again, back to Director Fish. So you wouldn't be providing us with a stormwater risk register if we went down this path with clause 3 as the Mayor's suggested, is that correct?
Well, through you, Madam CEO, I think we would be providing, I guess, a high-level overview of what's on that register, particularly highlighting those sites and your understanding of the sites that are of that much higher risk that are the current priority in terms of our staff resourcing, time and efforts.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Griffiths?
Just suggesting we could potentially look at a briefing.
We could. So why don't you, somebody raise that?
Councillors, can we just, we're almost there. Let's just stick with the program. Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
Question. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question to staff. First of all, sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, through Madam CEO to Director Fish, because I think I just want to pick up on what you just said. Point 3 in the amendment by Madam Mayor looks to me to be talking about only those locations. So are you saying it's the whole stormwater risk register in point 3 of her amendment?
So through you, Madam CEO, as I would understand point 3, it's referring specifically to those locations in Lake Cadide, but we would provide commentary in the context of the overall register that we have, so you have awareness of where those sites sit relative within that priority list.
Okay, thanks. One more question, which is sort of 2 parts, is how big is this work to undertake the report, and what won't be done if we're pursuing this report specifically just about Lake Cadide?
Through you, Madam CEO, so we have some basic analysis work already undertaken. We would probably need to do further work just to understand what some high level, I guess, design requirements that would be needed in order to estimate the cost. So there would be a staff time impact in that regard. As I said, it would be a high level report, look at what the scope would be, what the estimated high level estimated cost would be, and as I said, that ranking or advice on where it sits in terms of the overall priority list. So there is a staff time implication certainly in producing that work, but we would be probably keeping it relatively to a high level based on that where those sites currently sit within that priority list that we have.
Councillor Griffiths.
Just a quick question to Director Fish through you, Madam Mayor. I just note here that the previous resolution on April 22 was to note the costing of the upgrade of that stormwater works for the erosion. Have you got could you update us on that?
Just going to point 2. Okay. Through you, Madam CEO, so I understand the further on through that resolution of council, I think it refers to looking or progressing with some of the shorter term actions there, which relate to the outlets where the key issues exist, and the monthly Lake Cadide summary reports have been providing an update certainly on that month to month, and we have some funding to progress with that key outlet that's an issue, but the broader number of outlets that come out from Illaroo Road will be considered as part of the broader coastal management project there.
I'll just speak to this just quickly. I did note that 3, I think, of these is actually to be incorporated as part of the Ocean Drive works. I do know that from community feedback, and there was only a couple of people in that consultancy as part of the entire Ocean Drive network, and that the feedback that came through from that was that the people in the community didn't want to upgrade their Ocean Drive. So essentially, this may become a long-term project unless the community understand, I suppose, the risk register and whether there is really an identification of this being a key priority. If it's not a key priority and the community don't want to upgrade Ocean Drive, again, why are we going to pursue and go down that path? We're spending additional works and money when, you know, there's probably risk priority registers right at the top that we actually should be considering. So I do believe that, you know, we should be following the risk register and completing things as those priorities are identified.
Councillor Edwards.
Thanks very much, councillors, for the debate. And on the back of that, I will support this amendment. I'm much more comfortable with the notion that, you know, any parts of our community living in and around the villages and towns understand that we're always weighing up the whole LGA's needs, and that's really important for me. So I'll be supporting this amendment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards. Any other discussion? So we'll put the amendment to the vote then. All those in favour? Councillor Interman, Councillor Lipperback, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Griffiths and Councillor Shepherd. Thank you. Those against? Councillor Slade, Maltman, Roberts and myself will now move to the motion that it's become, and I think we've debated it all we need to, do you think? Yeah, sure.
I specifically, there's kind of a question posed, but not quite. It was about the relevance of that clause 2. About the relevance of talking about other townships and villages in our LGA, and the reason is because in that clause 2 that in fact that you'd inserted in the alternative motion was that it referred to noting that these hotspots were being added to the risk register for the whole LGA. So that's significant, because what we're noting straight off the bat is that these risks are in the context of the risks faced by all the villages across our LGA. And so, you know, we don't want people from different villages coming to us and advocating for us to, you know, note that their particular risks are there, and yes, they're important, they're real, and we want to address them. That's, you know, we want to do it the most efficiently and fast as we can, let staff do their job. But we don't want to get in the habit of picking particular places and jumping the queue. We don't want to get in the habit of picking particular ones for whatever reason and just moving them up the line and treating them as if they're more important than the other priorities that have been defined across a set criteria. So again, while I understand that people affected by these particular risks, which are real and which are impactful, they'll be perhaps unhappy with this amendment. I hope that there can be a coming back to that understanding of due process and considering how we best meet the needs of our broader community as quickly and efficiently as possible, so that the most possible, highest possible number of people's needs are met.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I will put the motion to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you. Councillors Interman, Lipperback, Edwards, Griffiths, Shepherd and myself. Those against? Slade, Maltman and Roberts. Thank you. I'll declare that carried. All right, so we'll now move to confidential matters. This is the time you all get to go home, for those of you sat out there with us. I hope you've had a great day, but we're going to have someone move in second that we move into confidential matters. Someone to move in second, moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. All those in favour? I see none against. I'll declare that carried. Thank you, everybody, for staying the course, and safe travels home. We'll see you again soon. Okay, thank you. Welcome back. We have just come out of the confidential, and I will pass through you, Madam CEO, through to you, Michael Ferguson, our Group Manager of Governance, and you will let us all know what was resolved in the confidential session.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With regard to item 14.01, T2260, Part B, Settlement Shores Canal Maintenance Dredging, Council resolved that 1, in accordance with Section 1781B of the Local Government General Regulation 2021, declined to accept any tenders submitted for T2260, Part B, Settlement Shores Estate Canal Maintenance Dredging. 2, that in accordance with Section 1783E, enter into negotiations with the contractor recognised by Council or any other person whether or not they submitted a tender to T2260, Part B, Settlement Shores Canal Maintenance Dredging, with a view to entering into a contract in relation to the subject matter of the tender. 3, pursuant to Section 1784A and B of the Local Government General Regulation 2021, declined to invite fresh tenders for the reasons that the evaluation panel considers that the contractor recognised by Council has the demonstrated experience, capacity and capability to meet the requirements of the request for tender. Inviting fresh tenders likely will not achieve a superior outcome, and inviting fresh tenders will unduly delay the project. 4, note the Chief Executive Officer, under existing delegation to the General Manager, may accept a tender for T2260 Part B Settlement Shores Estate Canal Dredging Maintenance following successful negotiations, and present a further report to a future meeting of Council after contract award for Council's information. And 5, maintain the confidentiality of the documents and consideration in respect of request for tender T2260 Part B Settlement Shores Estate Canal Dredging Maintenance. That item was carried unanimously. With regard to item 14.02, T2288, fixing country bridges, 5 major bridges, contractor works package, Council resolved 1, that in accordance with Section 1781B of the Local Government General Regulation 2021, declined to accept any tenders submitted for T2288, fixing country bridges, 5 major bridges, contractor works package. 2, in accordance with Section 1783E, enter into negotiations with the contractor recognised by Council or any other person whether or not they submitted a tender to T2288, fixing country bridges, 5 major bridges, contractor works package, with a view to entering into a contract in relation to the subject matter of the tender. 3, pursuant to Section 1784A and B of the Local Government General Regulation 2021, declined to invite fresh tenders for the reasons that the evaluation panel considers that the contractor recognised by Council has the demonstrated experience, capacity and capability to meet the requirements of the request for tender. Inviting fresh tenders likely will not achieve a superior outcome, and inviting fresh tenders will delay the project beyond the grant funding deadline. 4, note the Chief Executive Officer, under existing delegations to the General Manager, may accept a tender for T2288, fixing country bridges, 5 major bridges, contractor works package, following successful negotiations, and present a further report to a future meeting of Council after contract award for Council's information. And 5, maintain the confidentiality of the documents and consideration in respect of request for tender T2288, fixing country bridges, 5 major bridges, contractor works package. That item was also carried unanimously. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody, for being with us, and have a good evening, and I declare the meeting closed now at 7:17 p.m.